We live in a world of masks. Every interaction we have, every smile, every polite phrase, is often just a thin covering that hides a much darker or more complex reality beneath. This chapter will explore the psychological mask, the tool of deception, adaptation, and survival that humans have used since the dawn of social interaction. The concept of the mask is not new. Ancient societies already understood that people rarely show their raw selves. In Greek theater, masks represented gods, demons, or archetypes, creating distance between the actor and the role. In psychology, the mask functions in much the same way, a defense mechanism that protects the fragile core of who we really are, while simultaneously manipulating perceptions of those around us. The mask can be charming. Imagine someone walking into a room with radiant confidence. Their smile is perfect, their body language relaxed, their voice steady. On the surface, they radiate charisma, but perhaps beneath, they tremble with insecurity or calculate with cold precision. What we see and what truly exists are often two separate realities. The mask makes sure we see only what benefits the wearer. From the perspective of dark psychology, the mask is not merely protective. It becomes a weapon. A skilled manipulator knows how to switch masks instantly. With one person, they are sympathetic and attentive. With another, they are dominant and intimidating. This adaptability confuses, destabilizes, and eventually controls others. People fall prey because they never encounter the manipulator's real face, only the carefully crafted illusions. But masks are not always malicious. We all wear them in everyday life. You may wear the mask of politeness when dealing with a boss, even though frustration simmers beneath. You may wear the mask of strength when comforting a friend, though inside you are breaking. The mask, in essence, is the most human of tools. It shields, deceives, and adapts simultaneously. What makes it dangerous is when the mask becomes permanent. A person who hides for too long begins to forget who they really are. They dissolve into the illusion they created. The manipulator may start believing their own charm, their own fabricated confidence, their own fake compassion. And when that happens, even they no longer know where the mask ends and the true self begins. The key takeaway here is simple but unsettling. You can never trust a mask. What people show you is never the whole truth. The darkest minds know this, and they exploit it. If you can master the reading of masks, the small cracks where reality leaks through, you gain an extraordinary advantage. You begin to see the tremor behind the smile, the hesitation behind the confidence, the cruelty behind the kindness. In the following chapters, we will go deeper into these tactics. But for now, remember, everyone wears a mask, and some masks are far more dangerous than others. Words are powerful, but silence is devastating. Most people fear silence in conversation. They rush to fill the void with meaningless chatter, nervous laughter, or excuses. Yet, silence is one of the most potent psychological weapons ever discovered. Why? Because silence forces the other person to face themselves. It creates discomfort, amplifies anxiety, and makes them reveal far more than they intended. In negotiations, interrogations, and manipulation, silence is often the sharpest blade. Consider the simplest scenario. You ask someone a question, and then you say nothing. Seconds stretch into eternity. The person feels compelled to explain, to justify, to keep talking. The silence becomes unbearable, so they reveal more information than they planned. Manipulators thrive in this space. They let the victim destroy themselves with their own words. Psychologically, silence disrupts the brain's rhythm. Humans are wired for conversational flow. Question, answer, reaction, repeat. But when that rhythm breaks, the mind panics. That panic translates into vulnerability. Dark psychology exploits this panic, using silence as both a mirror and a trap. But silence is not always aggressive. It can also seduce. Imagine the calm confidence of someone who doesn't rush to reply, who lets silence breathe before answering. Their restraint suggests authority, mystery, control. They appear unshakable, while others scramble to fill the void. In relationships, silence is often used as punishment, the infamous silent treatment. This is not merely avoidance. It is psychological torture. By withholding communication, one person forces the other into desperation. They crave acknowledgement. They beg for reconciliation. The silence screams louder than words ever could. Yet, silence has its dangers. Use it too often and you risk alienation, become addicted to it, and you may lose touch with empathy. Like all dark tools, silence requires balance. But once mastered, it ensures control in almost any human interaction. The key lesson: words may convince, but silence enslaves. Fear is the oldest tool of control. Before there were laws, before there was money, before there was love, there was fear. It ruled tribes, kept children in line, and silenced rebellion. Fear at its core is survival instinct hijacked for manipulation. Every manipulator understands one truth: people will do almost anything to avoid pain. Fear of rejection, fear of punishment, fear of humiliation. These shape behavior more effectively than promises of reward. The tyrant thrives on fear. So does the charming manipulator who smiles while reminding you what could go wrong. Dark psychology weaponizes fear by exaggerating risks and minimizing escape. For example, a toxic partner may whisper, "Without me, no one will ever love you." That single seed of fear grows into dependency. The victim stays not out of love, but out of terror. In workplaces, bosses may rule by fear of failure or dismissal. Fear paralyzes creativity, but it ensures obedience. Entire societies have been built on fear. Dictatorships that last decades, because people prefer the devil they know to the unknown chaos of change. But fear is subtle, too. A glance, a tone, a pause before a threat. The most dangerous manipulators don't scream. They whisper. They know that the most terrifying fears are the ones we create ourselves, in the quiet of our minds. The paradox of fear is this: it feels like weakness, but in the hands of the manipulator, it becomes absolute power. Look here while the truth hides there. Misdirection is a magician's oldest trick and the manipulator's favorite tool. While your attention is focused on one thing, the real danger unfolds somewhere else. In conversation, misdirection works by changing the subject just as tension rises. Someone accuses you of wrongdoing, and you immediately bring up their past mistakes. The focus shifts, the pressure dissolves, and suddenly you're no longer guilty. They are. Politicians are masters of misdirection. When scandals surface, they flood the media with distractions. New headlines, new controversies, new spectacles, all designed to keep the public chasing shadows while the real crime stays hidden. Psychologically, humans are easy to misdirect because our attention is limited. We cannot focus on everything at once. Manipulators exploit this weakness. They overwhelm you with details, charm you with humor, or distract you with emotion, while quietly planning the idea they want you to believe. In personal relationships, misdirection can mask betrayal. A partner who is unfaithful may suddenly accuse you of being distant or suspicious. They flip the narrative, forcing you to defend yourself while their secret remains untouched. The cruel brilliance of misdirection is that once you realize it happened, it's too late. The trick is complete. The manipulator already got what they wanted. What if every decision you ever made was never truly yours? The illusion of choice is perhaps the most elegant trick of manipulation. Instead of forcing you to obey, the manipulator makes you believe you are free. In reality, every option you are given leads exactly where they want. Salespeople master this. They never ask, "Do you want to buy?" Instead, they ask, "Would you like the red one or the blue one?" The choice feels real, but either way, you are buying. Parents use it on children. Do you want to brush your teeth now or after 5 more minutes? The child feels empowered, even though brushing is inevitable. Dark psychology refines this technique. By framing options carefully, manipulators control outcomes without resistance. Victims walk willingly into cages, believing they chose it themselves. This trick is devastating in relationships. A manipulator might say, "You can either stay with me and be loved, or leave and be alone forever." Both options are traps. The illusion blinds a victim from seeing the third path, true freedom. The danger of the illusion of choice is that it doesn't feel like control. It feels like autonomy. That makes it harder to resist and nearly impossible to escape. Words are weapons, but silence is nuclear. Silence, when deployed strategically, creates tension, mystery, and psychological discomfort that words could never achieve. Imagine two people in conversation. One speaks nervously, trying to explain themselves, justify themselves, defend themselves. The other says nothing. The silence stretches, thickens, presses down on the nervous speaker until they break under the weight of their own need to fill the void. That is the power of silence. In dark psychology, silence functions as a mirror. People pour their secrets into it, exposing themselves while the silent one reveals nothing. This imbalance of vulnerability shifts control instantly. The one who stays quiet appears calm, dominant, even intimidating. The one who babbles becomes weak, desperate, transparent. Consider interrogations. Skilled investigators often allow suspects to talk themselves into a corner by simply sitting still and listening. A manipulator does the same in everyday life. They don't need to argue, persuade, or threaten. They simply let silence force the other person to reveal too much. But silence can also manipulate emotions. Lovers know this instinctively. The sudden withdrawal of communication creates anxiety, longing, and obsession. The absence of words speaks louder than the sweetest declarations. The brain fills silence with projections, and most of them are darker than reality. Silence is not passive. It is an active tool of control. In relationships, in negotiations, in power struggles, silence dominates a battlefield without lifting a sword. Key lesson: the one who controls silence controls the room. Guilt is a prison that locks itself from the inside. It is one of the most devastating psychological levers because it does not require chains, only the mind's own tendency to self-punish. When guilt is activated, people seek redemption, forgiveness, or relief. A manipulator knows this and positions themselves as the one who can offer that release, but at a price. Parents do it with children. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Lovers do it with partners. If you really cared, you would have stayed. Institutions, governments, and religions do it on a larger scale, binding entire populations with the crushing weight of guilt. The mind under guilt becomes compliant. It bends, obeys, sacrifices, all in a desperate attempt to lift the invisible weight pressing on the chest. And yet, the more one gives, the heavier the guilt becomes. Because guilt thrives on sacrifice, it feeds on submission. Dark psychology recognizes guilt as a form of soft power. Unlike fear, which burns fast, guilt lingers. It corrodes. It eats from the inside out until people sabotage themselves. A manipulator does not need to destroy their victim. The victim destroys themselves under guilt's crushing gravity. Key lesson: guilt makes people slaves without chains. Fear is primal. It is older than civilization, older than language, older than thought. Fear has kept humans alive for millennia, but it has also kept them obedient. A person in fear does not think, they react. They don't analyze, they comply. Fear bypasses reason and hijacks survival instinct. That is why it is the greatest puppet master in dark psychology. Leaders have known this since the beginning of time. Kings, tyrants, dictators, cult leaders all rule not by love, but by fear. Because fear guarantees obedience. Fear makes people follow orders they would normally find unthinkable. Fear erases morality, replaces logic with survival, and turns free individuals into puppets dancing on invisible strings. But fear doesn't have to be grand or political. It can be intimate, subtle, personal. Fear of abandonment keeps lovers trapped. Fear of poverty keeps employees silent. Fear of rejection keeps people obedient in social circles. The cruel truth is that most people are not free. They are simply too afraid to step outside the lines drawn for them. Key lesson: whoever controls fear controls the strings. Freedom of choice is the sweetest lie. Most choices people make are illusions carefully crafted to give the impression of autonomy while leading to the same outcome. Consider a child told, "Do you want broccoli or spinach for dinner?" They feel empowered, but the outcome, eating vegetables, is already fixed. Manipulators extend this principle into every corner of life. In marketing, you are given two products, both owned by the same company. In politics, you are given two candidates, both serving the same system. In relationships, a partner might say, "Do you want to apologize now or later?" Both choices serve their goal. The brilliance of the illusion is that it makes resistance feel unnecessary. The victim believes they chose freely, while in reality, their path was carved long before. Dark psychology thrives on illusions because illusions eliminate rebellion. You cannot fight against what you think you chose. Key lesson: the most dangerous prison is the one decorated with choices. Power is the ultimate drug. Unlike love, unlike money, unlike pleasure, power intoxicates without end. Once tasted, it is never enough. Dark psychology reveals a truth that many fear to admit. People don't just want safety or comfort, they crave control, even in small ways. A boss controlling employees, a parent controlling a child, a partner controlling a partner. These small doses of power are addictive. The dangerous part of power is that it blinds. Those who hold it believe they are untouchable. Those who don't obsess over getting it. Entire wars, betrayals, and atrocities have been fueled not by survival, but by the hunger for power. And yet, power is fragile. It exists only as long as others believe in it. A king without subjects is just a man in a chair. A manipulator without followers is powerless. The seduction of power, then, is not only in holding it, but in convincing others you deserve to hold it. That is the darkest trick of all. Key lesson: power seduces both the master and the servant. Silence is one of the most underestimated weapons in human psychology. We live in a world dominated by noise. Conversations, notifications, opinions shouted across digital landscapes. Most people believe that speaking, arguing, or shouting louder will grant them control. But the truth is far darker. Silence itself is control. When someone falls silent during an argument, their presence becomes heavier. Their refusal to respond plants seeds of doubt in the other's mind. Did I go too far? Did I offend them? Are they angry, or are they simply superior? This discomfort forces the other person to speak more, to fill the void. And in filling the silence, they often reveal more than they ever intended. The silence technique has been used by interrogators, therapists, and manipulators alike. In interrogation, silence breaks suspects faster than threats. In therapy, silence draws out confessions. In manipulation, silence destabilizes, turning the victim into a self-revealing puppet. Think of a simple example. You send a long, emotional message to someone and they don't reply. Hours pass, then a day. You check your phone obsessively, rereading what you wrote, second-guessing every word. Their silence is louder than any insult could ever be. It forces you to beg for closure, to give them power over your emotions. Dark psychology teaches us this. Silence is never empty. It is full of meaning, full of pressure, full of manipulation. Masters of silence know when to withdraw their words, when to let someone drown in the noise of their own mind. The stickman illustration here could show two figures, one shouting desperately, while the other simply stands still, silent, their presence towering. A white grid beneath them represents the battlefield, and the black frame above displays the title. Key takeaway: silence is not absence, it is dominance. A gaze can pierce deeper than words. Staring too long or not long enough changes the entire balance of power in a conversation. Eye contact regulates trust, dominance, and submission. It is a primal code hardwired into our nervous systems since the dawn of survival. Predators in the wild lock eyes with their prey, freezing them in place. Humans are no different. A manipulator knows how to wield their gaze, steady enough to intimidate, soft enough to seduce, fleeting enough to create mystery. The danger lies in how much the gaze reveals. Someone who cannot hold eye contact is seen as weak, insecure, even deceitful. Someone who stares too long is viewed as aggressive, controlling, or invasive. The master manipulator balances between the two, switching intensity as needed. Consider the effect of a simple pause. Imagine sitting across from someone who listens to you but doesn't break eye contact. Their silence, paired with their gaze, forces you to explain more, to justify yourself. Eventually, you hand them the very information they wanted, not because they asked, but because their stare compelled you. Dark psychology thrives here. The gaze becomes hypnosis, not in a theatrical sense, but in the subtle conditioning of behavior. People begin to adjust themselves under the invisible weight of eyes they cannot escape. The stickman illustration might show one white figure staring intensely, while the other fidgets nervously, unable to hold still. The grid beneath them glows faintly, symbolizing tension, and the black frame crowns the scene with the chapter title. Words shouted can be ignored. Commands given loudly are often resisted, but whispers, subtle suggestions, slip past offenses. Suggestion is the art of planting thoughts inside another person's mind so gently that they believe those thoughts are their own. It works because the human mind craves patterns, meaning, and completion. If you begin a sentence and trail off, people will finish it in their head. If you hint at a conclusion, they will unconsciously adopt it. For instance, if you say, "Most people wouldn't take a risk like this, but you're not like most people," the listener feels compelled to live up to that frame. The dark manipulator never orders. They imply. They never demand. They invite. And in doing so, they gain obedience without resistance. Suggestion is most powerful when wrapped in emotion, a whisper during a vulnerable moment, a hint when trust is high. These slip directly into the subconscious. People act not because they were told to, but because they felt it was their decision. The illustration here could show one stickman leaning close, whispering into another's ear, while faint lines radiate into the other's head, symbolizing implanted thoughts. Doubt is poison. It creeps in the mind and spreads like wildfire, consuming certainty, destroying trust. Once planted, it rarely disappears. It lingers, festering, growing until it replaces reality with suspicion. Manipulators use doubt to dismantle confidence. They don't need to prove anything. They just need to ask the right question. Are you sure? Did it really happen that way? Why would they say that about you? The victim begins to replay events, second-guess memories, question loyalties. This works because humans rely heavily on perception and memory, both of which are fragile. A manipulator who understands the fragility doesn't fight directly against truth. They simply distort with shadows. Doubt is the first crack in the wall of certainty. Once the crack appears, the entire structure begins to crumble. Relationships collapse, self-esteem shatters, decisions falter. The manipulator doesn't even need to act anymore. The victim sabotages themselves. Imagine two stickmen, one standing tall, whispering a single question, while the other crumbles, clutching their head, overwhelmed by spirals of uncertainty. The white grid beneath them glows like fractured glass. The ultimate form of dark psychology is control, not temporary influence, not momentary persuasion, but the power to turn another human into a puppet whose strings you pull. Control is built slowly. First comes a mask, then silence, then suggestion, then doubt. Each layer weakens the victim's defenses until they are pliable, compliant, willing. By the time the strings are visible, it is already too late. The puppeteer thrives in invisibility. Victims often believe they are acting freely, unaware that their thoughts, emotions, and choices are being subtly directed. The greatest trick is making the puppet think they hold the strings themselves. Consider this chilling truth. The more a manipulator invests in studying someone, the more predictable they become. Habits, fears, desires, all cataloged, all exploited. The strings are not ropes but threads of psychology. Fear, guilt, reward, love, shame. And once tied, breaking free is nearly impossible without awareness. Most victims remain bound forever, smiling even as they dance to someone else's tune. The stickman illustration could show a large looming figure holding glowing strings attached to another, smaller figure, who dances helplessly. The grid beneath shines like a stage. Human beings love to believe they are free. We hold tightly to the idea of free will, autonomy, independence. Yet history, psychology, and manipulation reveal a much darker truth. Most of our decisions are not our own. They are influenced, directed, and sometimes entirely fabricated by someone else pulling invisible strings. The puppet master is not always obvious. It could be the politician who stirs your emotions with carefully chosen words. It could be the marketer who places colors, sounds, and slogans in the right places to bypass your rational brain and go straight to your instincts. It could even be a lover who whispers the right promises, all while shaping your choices to their hidden desires. To understand the puppet master, you must first accept that humans are programmable. Studies in behavioral psychology prove this. Classical conditioning shows us how easily a trigger can create a response. Operant conditioning reveals how rewards and punishments shape our patterns. Social proof demonstrates how much we rely on others to validate our actions. The true manipulator knows how to combine these. They tug one string with praise, another with fear, another with scarcity, another with guilt. And before you realize it, you are dancing, moving, living in ways that feel natural. But in reality, they are choreographed performances under someone else's control. What makes the puppet master so dangerous is that they don't need to force you. They don't need chains or threats. They only need to understand your mind better than you do. They observe your weaknesses, your habits, your desires. Then, quietly, they weave them into the strings of control. The terrifying truth? Every one of us has been a puppet at some point. Few psychological tactics are as devastating, as corrosive, and as silent as gaslighting. Unlike physical control, gaslighting does not attack your body. It dismantles your mind. It twists your memory, undermines your confidence, and corrodes your perception of reality. Gaslighting begins with subtlety. A manipulator might deny something obvious. That never happened. Or they may shift the blame. You're too sensitive. Slowly, repeatedly, they inject doubt. The victim starts to wonder, am I overreacting? Did I misremember? Am I going crazy? The cruelty of gaslighting lies in its invisibility. Unlike shouting or threats, it doesn't leave scars you can point to. Instead, it makes you question yourself. Your truth becomes foggy, your certainty eroded. Eventually, you begin relying on the manipulator for guidance, for clarity, for reality itself. History is filled with gaslighting. Entire regimes have thrived on rewriting facts, denying atrocities, creating illusions that millions believed. In relationships, it appears when one partner twists reality to maintain power. In families, it may show when a parent convinces a child that their suffering is imaginary. The end game of gaslighting is not mere control. It is ownership of your perception. And once someone owns your perception, they own you. The only weapon against gaslighting is awareness. Recognizing the signs. Trusting the small voice inside that says, something is wrong. But once deep inside its grip, few escape without scars. Some manipulations are temporary, gaslighting, deception, charm. But others are traps, designed to hold the mind forever. These traps are not cages of steel, but of thought, invisible, yet almost impossible to break free from once they take hold. One of the oldest traps is the sunk cost fallacy. When someone has invested time, money, or emotion into something, they feel compelled to continue, even when it's destroying them. Abusive relationships thrive on this. Toxic jobs exploit it. Cults master it. You've already given so much you can't quit now. Another trap is intermittent reinforcement, rewarding unpredictably. Casinos know it. Abusive partners know it. Social media platforms know it. The brain craves the next hit, the next validation, even if most attempts end in disappointment. This is how millions stay addicted, not just to substances, but to approval, likes, and toxic people. Then there's the illusion of scarcity. If you believe something is rare, you cling to it, even if it harms you. Manipulators create urgency. Last chance, only for you. No one else will love you like I do. Scarcity transforms abuse into something people desperately guard, too afraid to lose. These traps thrive because they exploit the very structure of the human brain. Evolution designed us to survive uncertainty, to cling to connections, to protect investments. Manipulators weaponize this wiring, turning survival instincts into chains. Escaping requires brutal honesty. You must ask yourself, am I staying because it's good or because I'm trapped? Fear is the oldest emotion. Before love, before joy, before hope, there was fear. It kept our ancestors alive, alert to predators, storms, enemies. But in the hands of manipulators, fear is not just protective, it is seductive. Fear simplifies the world. It pushes people into survival mode, where choices narrow and logic collapses. A frightened mind is easier to control than a calm one. Politicians understand this. Leaders throughout history have risen by amplifying fear of the other. When people are afraid, they accept rules they would otherwise resist. In personal relationships, fear is equally effective. An abusive partner may not need physical violence. A single threat, a look, a suggestion of abandonment is often enough to trap someone. Fear paralyzes. Fear isolates. Fear convinces a victim that survival depends on obedience. But fear can also masquerade as passion. Consider horror films, thrill rides, even dangerous relationships. Fear excites as much as it terrifies. Manipulators understand this duality. They keep their prey balanced on the knife edge between terror and thrill, addicted to the cycle. The most terrifying truth is that once fear takes root, it rarely leaves. Even when the manipulator is gone, the echoes remain. Fear plants seeds in mind, growing shadows that last a lifetime. The greatest trick of all is not deception, not gaslighting, not even fear. The ultimate weapon of dark psychology is the complete control of reality itself. When someone controls your reality, they no longer need to manipulate moment by moment. They shape the entire world in which you live. This is the essence of cults, authoritarian regimes, abusive families, and toxic relationships. Reality control begins with language. Words are powerful. Change the words, you change the thoughts. A manipulator might forbid certain terms or create new ones. Suddenly, people cannot even think outside the framework given. George Orwell understood this in 1984. Language becomes a prison of thought. Then comes control of memory. Rewrite the past. Deny what happened. Replace it with new facts. Soon, even the victim doubts their own history. If yesterday can be changed, then tomorrow belongs to the manipulator as well. Finally, reality control solidifies through isolation. Cut people off from dissenting voices. Surround them only with the manipulator perspective, and the illusion becomes complete. To the victim, lies are no longer lies. They are truth. Chains are no longer chains. They are protection. The ultimate illusion is not convincing someone of a single lie. It is creating a world where they cannot even imagine the truth. We often imagine predators as wild, impulsive creatures, lions that charge, wolves that leap, or snakes that strike the instant prey crosses their path. But in the realm of human psychology, the most dangerous predators are those who wait. Patience for them is not a weakness but a sharpened blade. They understand a simple truth. Time bends minds. Time erodes defenses. Time, when properly weaponized, can break even the strongest will. A manipulator who relies on patience is like a spider. They weave a web carefully, invisibly, not rushing to snare prey, but ensuring the trap is perfect. Once finished, they sit quietly, still unnoticed. Hours pass. Days. Weeks. Months. To them, time is irrelevant because they know the prey will eventually stumble into their web. Consider the subtle manipulator who courts trust slowly. At first, they are unremarkable, blending in, avoiding any action that would raise suspicion. They offer small favors, smiles, harmless comments. They're never pushy. But behind this mask of casual interaction, they are measuring you, your fears, your weaknesses, your habits. Each shared secret, each moment of vulnerability, is quietly stored like data in a predator's mind. Patience works because humans crave immediacy. We expect attacks to be fast, betrayals to be sudden. When someone takes months or even years before revealing their intentions, we never see it coming. That's the genius of predatory patience. When the strike finally arrives, it feels not like an attack but a betrayal of the deepest order, because you trusted them completely. The darkest minds even apply patience in conversation. They don't argue. They don't rush to correct. Instead, they let you speak, unraveling yourself with every word. They create silences so heavy you feel compelled to fill them. And the more you talk, the more you reveal. Eventually, they know you better than you know yourself, and they have never revealed a thing about who they are. This tactic is chilling because it mirrors nature's most effective hunters. The crocodile waits half submerged in muddy water. The owl perches in silence, its prey oblivious. Human predators are no different. They know that stillness is not inaction. Stillness is calculation. Stillness is power. But patience as a weapon doesn't only exist in manipulation. It appears in relationships, negotiations, and even power struggles. Those who can tolerate discomfort longer than others often win. They can outweigh your anger, outlast your silence, endure your resistance until you collapse. In this sense, patience is not passive. It is the slow tightening of a noose. For those who seek to protect themselves, the lesson is grim but necessary. Beware of those who wait too long. Beware of people who give without ever asking, who listen without ever sharing, who seem too comfortable in silence. They may not be friends. They may simply be waiting for the perfect time to strike. The predator's patience is terrifying precisely because it is invisible. And when you finally see it, it's already too late. Silence. To most people, silence is awkward, heavy, unbearable. It presses against the mind like an invisible weight, demanding to be filled with words, laughter, noise, anything to ease attention. But to a manipulator, silence is not emptiness. Silence is a weapon, and those who master it can control a room without speaking a single word. The silent manipulator thrives in stillness. They know that the human brain interprets silence as uncertainty. Did they disapprove of what you said? Are they judging you? Do they secretly know something you don't? The mind begins to race, searching for answers, desperately trying to interpret the absence of sound. And in that storm of overthinking, the manipulator gains the upper hand. Think of a simple conversation. You confess something, a mistake, a dream, a fear, and instead of reacting, the manipulator stays perfectly quiet. No nod, no sigh, no laugh. Just a calm, motionless presence. Within seconds, your confidence shatters. You start to explain yourself, to backtrack, to justify. And with each word, you hand them more power. They never had to push you. You push yourself. This tactic is often disguised as deep listening. Society teaches us that good communicators listen more than they speak. So when someone remains silent, we assume they're thoughtful, respectful. But in reality, silence can be engineered to create discomfort. The longer the pause, the more desperate you become to fill it. The manipulator knows exactly how long to hold that void. Long enough for you to crumble, but never so long that they appear strange. The silent manipulator doesn't just operate in conversations. They use silence in relationships. A sudden withdrawal of words, the infamous silent treatment, can be more punishing than shouting. Humans crave connection, and silence feels like rejection, abandonment. Days of wordlessness can drive a person into guilt, regret, or desperation. And when the silence finally breaks, it feels like relief. You'll do anything to avoid returning to that void, even if it means surrendering your boundaries. Silence is also a negotiation tool. Imagine sitting across from someone at a table. You make an offer, they lean back, and they say nothing. Seconds pass, then minutes. You start to sweat. Your brain screams, say something, lower the price, sweeten the deal. And so you talk and talk and talk until you've given away more than you intended. Meanwhile, they haven't uttered a single word. There's a reason law enforcement, therapists, and even interrogators are trained in the power of silence. People are terrified of empty space. They reveal secrets to escape it. They confess sins just to fill it. They give away truths because the silence feels louder than words. And the manipulator knows this instinctively. The most chilling thing about the silent manipulator is that they appear harmless. They don't shout, they don't argue, they don't openly dominate. Instead, they watch, they wait, they let you expose yourself until you realize too late that the entire time you were negotiating with yourself. They never had to fight for control. You handed it over voluntarily. And when silence becomes a pattern, it begins to shape you. You start anticipating their quiet judgment. You second-guess every word before you even say it. You censor yourself, afraid of provoking another heavy pause. Slowly, their silence rewires your behavior. Without lifting a finger, they've built a cage around your mind. There's an old psychological experiment called the still face test. In it, a caregiver interacts with a baby normally, smiling and talking. Then, suddenly, they stop responding. They go completely still, silent, expressionless. Within seconds, the baby panics. It cries, flails, desperately tries to reconnect. This is a raw power of silence. It cuts deeper than anger, deeper than punishment. It denies the very thing we crave most, acknowledgement. For those who wish to resist, the lesson is brutal. You must learn to tolerate silence, to sit in the void without flinching, to recognize when the pause is not absence, but manipulation. Because once you stop fearing silence, you break the manipulator's weapon. You remove the sting from their most subtle, invisible trick. But make no mistake, silence, when wielded by the wrong person, is not neutral. It is sharp. It is surgical. And in the hands of a silent manipulator, it can carve your identity into pieces without ever spilling a drop of blood. Or at least, that's what we like to believe. But what happens when a mirror doesn't reflect reality? When it bends, twists, and distorts until you can no longer tell who you are? This is the specialty of the false mirror manipulator. They make you believe that you see yourself, when in truth, you're staring at their construction of you. The tactic is deceptively simple. Reflect back what people want or what they fear until they can no longer distinguish their identity from the version you project. Unlike overt liars, the false mirror doesn't need to invent stories. They just reshape your story and hold it up in front of you, convincing you that it was always the truth. Imagine you confess a weakness. I get nervous when I speak in front of people. Instead of dismissing it, the false mirror nods slowly and says, "Yes, I've noticed." You do stumble when you're under pressure. Even if you've never actually stumbled, the suggestion worms its way into your mind. You start to replay past moments, searching for evidence. You begin to internalize their reflection. Soon, you walk into every meeting expecting to fail, and inevitably you do. The false mirror is a master at gaslighting. They alter fragments of your memory, not by shouting, not by forcing, but by carefully echoing back a distorted version of events. That's not how it happened. You were the one who got upset. Or, "You're remembering wrong. I was calm the whole time." They say it with such calm conviction that you doubt your own mind. In time, their reflection feels more reliable than your memory. But the most insidious version isn't about your past. It's about your identity. They shape how you see yourself by constantly reinforcing selective reflections. Want someone to believe they're weak? Show them only their failures. Want them to believe they're dependent? Remind them how lost they'd be without you. Like a funhouse mirror, they never give you the full picture, only the fragments that suit their control. The false mirror also knows how to seduce. When they want to gain your trust, they reflect your best traits back at you. You're so intelligent. You notice things others don't. You're special, not like everyone else. This mirroring creates a powerful bond because humans are drawn to those who see us. We feel validated, recognized. But what we don't realize is that the reflection is tailored, not true. The manipulator doesn't see you. They see a version of you that serves their plan. Think about relationships where one person slowly loses themselves. At first, they were confident, independent. But over time, the false mirror partners subtly reshape their self-image. You're too emotional. You always overreact. You're lucky I put up with your flaws. Day by day, reflection by reflection, the victim starts to see themselves through the manipulator's distorted lens. And when they look in the real mirror, they no longer recognize who they are. This trick works because humans don't experience themselves directly. We rely on feedback, the way others respond to us, to construct our identity. From childhood, parents, teachers, and friends act as mirrors, shaping our sense of worth. So when a manipulator hijacks that mirror, they hijack the very foundation of our self. They don't just control what you think. They control who you think you are. What makes the false mirror so dangerous is their subtlety. They rarely attack directly. Instead, they tilt the mirror just enough to alter the angle of your reflection. A compliment here, a criticism there, a small correction to your memory. Each adjustment seems harmless, but over weeks, months, years, the distortion grows until your reflection is a stranger. And once you no longer trust your own reflection, you depend on theirs. You seek their validation, their corrections, their version of reality. Without their mirror, you feel lost. This dependency is their victory. Breaking free requires something terrifying. Looking into a real mirror and facing yourself unfiltered, unreflected. It means sitting with your flaws without exaggeration, accepting your strengths without external validation. Few can do this easily because it demands rebuilding an identity from the ground up. But unless you reclaim your reflection, the false mirror will always own it. There's an old story of Narcissus, the man who fell in love with his reflection in the water. He didn't realize the image wasn't real. It was only a projection. The false mirror manipulator works the same way. They lure you into loving, hating, or fearing an image that doesn't exist. And while you're fixated on that illusion, they control you completely. The cruelest part? By the time you realize the mirror was false, you may not remember what the true reflection ever looked like. Not all traps come with chains. Some arrive wrapped in ribbons, shining with promises, glowing with generosity. But the most dangerous gifts are not the ones we open eagerly. They're the ones that open us. This is a realm of the empty gift manipulator, who uses the illusion of generosity to gain control. At first glance, their tactic looks harmless, even kind. They give freely. Attention, favors, compliments, material presents. You feel special, chosen. Gratitude stirs in your chest, and gratitude is a powerful leash. Because once you accept their gift, you carry an invisible debt, one that grows heavier the longer you deny it. The genius of the empty gift lies in its hollowness. It looks valuable, but its purpose is never to enrich you. Its only function is to bind. A manipulator knows that humans are wired to reciprocate. When someone gives, we feel compelled to give back. That's how trust, love, and community are built. But the empty gift twists this instinct into a weapon. Imagine a coworker who helps you with a project. They insist it was no big deal. But later, they expect your silence when they make a mistake. Or a partner who showers you with expensive presents and then uses those same gifts to remind you how much you owe them. The gift was never free. It was an investment, and you are to return. Some gifts aren't even material. They can be time, affection, information. A manipulator might lend you their support during a crisis, only to later use that support as leverage. After everything I did for you, you're really going to walk away? Their generosity is always laced with poison. The empty gift also plays with invisible strings. Often, you won't even realize the debt until the moment they pull it. For weeks or months, you enjoy their kindness, their availability. Then one day, they demand something small, a favor, an agreement, your silence. You hesitate, and they tilt their head. Really? After all I've given you? The guilt burns hotter than any chain. What makes this tactic devastating is that it corrupts the very concept of kindness. Victims begin to mistrust generosity altogether. They wonder, is this person helping me? Or am I falling into another debt? Over time, they close themselves off, unable to accept real love or friendship, fearing the trap inside. The manipulator doesn't just control them in the moment. They scar their ability to trust. And the most skilled empty gift manipulators don't even need to ask. The victim often enslaves themselves preemptively. They anticipate the debt and pay it without being asked. I'll help them because they've helped me so much. I'll stay silent. I owe them that much. The manipulator never has to lift a finger. Their generosity becomes a prison the victim builds around themselves. In psychological terms, this is a perverse inversion of reciprocity, one of the most powerful social rules. Society survives because we trade kindness for kindness, but the manipulator drains the rule of its humanity, leaving only the mechanics. They exploit the loop until you're no longer acting freely, but reflexively, a puppet pulled by invisible threads of gratitude. The empty gift can also appear in the realm of morality. A person may appear as a savior, a protector, a mentor. They rescue you from danger. Sometimes danger they secretly engineered. And in return, you give them loyalty, obedience, trust. The savior complex isn't about saving. It's about ownership. Even religions, politics, and corporations have used the empty gift. They offer salvation, freedom, or opportunity. But the terms are written in invisible ink. You take the gift, and you accept the leash. Gratitude binds entire populations as effectively as fear. But there is something more disturbing still. Sometimes the empty gift is poisoned by design. The manipulator gives you something they know will harm you, but frames it as generosity, a loan that buries you in debt, advice that leads you into failure, a relationship that isolates you. You cling to it grateful, never realizing the gift itself is the weapon. How do you defend yourself? By recognizing that not all gifts are equal. A true gift is given with no expectation. It leaves you free. The empty gift always carries weight, even if invisible. When you feel guilt, obligation, or fear tied to someone's kindness, pause. Ask yourself, if I never repay this, will they still treat me the same? If the answer is no, then the gift was never a gift. But beware, refusing the empty gift comes at a cost. Manipulators know how to twist rejection into guilt. I was only trying to help. You don't appreciate kindness. They make you feel cruel for resisting. That's why so many accept the trap. It feels easier than confrontation. The cruel paradox is that the most dangerous gift isn't the one that enslaves you immediately. It's the one you don't notice until years later, when your life choices have already been bent by its weight. A career taken out of gratitude. A marriage endured out of debt. A silence kept for decades because you once accepted help. The empty gift is a seed planted in your soul. And once it grows, you may never be able to tell which decisions were truly yours and which were repayment for something you never really wanted. There are prisons made of stone, iron, and walls. But the most suffocating one is built of your own reflection. This is the weapon of the mirror cage manipulator. They don't chain you with force, but with a version of yourself they convince you to see. The mirror cage works like this. They hold up a mirror and tell you, this is who you are, but the mirror is distorted. Sometimes it makes you look weaker than you are, sometimes more guilty, sometimes more broken. And once you stare into that mirror long enough, you begin to believe it. Humans crave self-understanding. We look for reflections everywhere, in parents, lovers, teachers, friends. The mirror cage manipulator exploits this instinct. They feed you a narrative of yourself. And because it comes from outside, it feels more objective than your own doubts. Slowly, you trade your identity for the one they provide. The trick is subtle. It starts with labels. You're too sensitive. You're selfish. You'll never survive without me. At first, these words sting but don't bind. Yet repetition transforms them into internal truth. Soon, the voice in your head isn't yours anymore. It's theirs, echoing endlessly. Some mirror cages are made of shame. A parent reminds a child of every mistake until the child grows up seeing failure in every reflection. Some are made of dependency. A lover convinces their partner they're unlovable to anyone else. Others are made of guilt. A manipulator convinces you that you wronged them so deeply, you must spend your life making it right. The genius of this cage is that it requires no guards. Once you've accepted the distorted reflection, you police yourself. You no longer need external punishment. You carry the prison in your mind. And the cruelest part? Even when the manipulator leaves, the cage remains. Victims carry it for years, sometimes forever. Psychologically, this weapon works because identity is fluid. Neuroscience shows that self-image isn't fixed. It's constructed from feedback. When enough of that feedback is poisoned, the construction collapses into a cage. And escaping it isn't just about rejecting the manipulator. It's about rebuilding your entire sense of self. But the mirror cage has another layer: flattery. Not all reflections are ugly. Sometimes a manipulator traps you with an image of greatness. They convince you you're smarter, more talented, more special than others. But only through them. Without their validation, your greatness disappears. This gilded reflection is just as binding as shame, because it makes you fear losing the one person who sees your brilliance. That's the paradox. Whether the mirror shows ugliness or beauty, both can imprison. What matters is not the reflection itself, but the dependency it creates. Consider how cult leaders use the mirror cage. They convince followers that outside the group they are weak, sinful, doomed. Inside they are chosen, enlightened, special. The follower's entire identity becomes welded to the reflection provided. To leave would mean not just walking away, but erasing who they believe they are. Even in relationships, the mirror cage thrives. An abuser may tell their partner, "Without me, you're nothing." Or worse, "Without you, I'm nothing. If you leave, I'll die." Both cages trap, one with shame, the other with guilt. The mirror doesn't just reflect. It twists, manipulates, consumes. The most dangerous mirrors are the ones that blur truth and distortion. They mix genuine flaws with exaggerations, real strengths with false praise. You can't separate reality from illusion. And when every reflection is suspect, doubt becomes your only constant. Doubt of yourself, doubt of your choices, doubt of your freedom. Over time, the mirror cage doesn't just trap you, it becomes you. You forget what you look like before it. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who do they say I am?" Your soul becomes outsourced to a manipulator who profits from your confusion. Escaping the mirror cage is one of the hardest psychological battles. It requires smashing the mirror, but when you've looked into it for years, breaking it feels like breaking yourself. Victims often defend their manipulators, clinging to the reflection because it feels safer than facing the void of not knowing who they are without it. The cruel truth is this: the mirror cage doesn't need to be real to control you, even if it's built on lies. Its bars are solid as long as you believe. The prison is made of perception, and perception shapes reality. And so the manipulator smiles, holding up the mirror, knowing that the cage is already inside you. They don't need chains. They only need your reflection. There are chains you can see and chains you cannot. The invisible debt is one of the cruelest psychological traps ever used. It is a prison built not of iron, not of lies, but of obligation. The manipulator doesn't enslave you with threats or commands. Instead, they give favors, gifts, help, support. They offer you something you desperately need: money, protection, attention, love. But beneath their generosity, there is a silent contract. You owe me. This is the essence of invisible debt. At first, it looks like kindness. It feels like salvation. You may even believe you found someone who truly cares. But over time, the debt grows heavier. Each gift is a chain around your neck, each favor, another weight on your back. Until one day, you realize you no longer live freely. You live to repay. The manipulator rarely states the debt outright. They don't have to. Instead, they remind you in subtle, poisonous ways. "After everything I've done for you, no one else would have helped you the way I did. You think you'd be here without me?" The guilt seeps in like smoke. You begin to feel ungrateful for even thinking of refusing them. Their generosity becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. Invisible debt works because humans are wired for reciprocity. In every culture, kindness is repaid. Gifts create bonds. Favors create obligations. This instinct kept ancient tribes alive, sharing food, sharing shelter. But in the hands of a manipulator, reciprocity becomes a cage. They exploit the very instinct that once kept us human. Here's the horror. The debt is never clear, never finite. You don't know how much you owe or when it will be enough. And that's by design. Because if the debt had an end, you could repay it. But the manipulator makes it infinite. No matter how much you give back, it's never enough. The balance always tips in their favor. Sometimes the invisible debt is financial. A parent pays for your education, then uses it to control your adult choices. Sometimes it's emotional. A partner rescues you from loneliness, then binds you with guilt for wanting independence. Sometimes it's social. A boss gives you a chance, then demands endless loyalty at the expense of your life. The cruelest form is spiritual, when someone convinces you that your soul itself is indebted, that without their guidance, your existence is meaningless. In cults, this is as sharp as weapon. The leader frames salvation as a debt you can never repay. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every act of obedience is framed as proof of gratitude, and still it is never enough. The genius of invisible debt lies in its silence. Unlike open contracts, this one doesn't need words. The victim writes it themselves, in their heart. They feel guilty even without being reminded. The manipulator doesn't need a demand. The victim enslaved themselves, desperate to prove they are not ungrateful. But gratitude twisted into obligation becomes poison. Real gratitude uplifts, connects, inspires. Invisible debt suffocates, drains, enslaves. One of the most insidious aspects of this trap is that outsiders rarely see it. To the world, the manipulator looks generous, selfless, kind. They are praised for their sacrifices, while the victim, consumed by guilt, feels like a parasite. The cage is invisible not just to them, but to everyone. And here's the cruel irony. Sometimes, the manipulator truly believes in their own generosity. They don't see themselves as abusive, but as benevolent. In their mind, they've given so much that they deserve loyalty, control, repayment. They hide their chains even from themselves. The victim, meanwhile, carries the impossible burden of a debt they never agreed to. They begin to censor their desires, abandon their dreams, silence their needs. Freedom feels selfish. Independence feels cruel. Happiness feels like betrayal. Invisible debt doesn't just trap the body. It colonizes the conscience. It convinces you that your very morality demands your servitude. To resist isn't just rebellion. It's ingratitude, the worst sin in the manipulator's world. Over time, the victim's entire identity can collapse under the weight of repayment. They forget what it feels like to act without guilt, to want without shame. Every decision becomes a calculation of repayment. Every step is shadowed by the whisper, "You owe me, you owe me, you owe me." Escaping invisible debt is one of the hardest things a victim can do because it requires rejecting the manipulator's generosity. It requires saying the unthinkable, "I don't owe you." But saying those words feels monstrous, like biting the hand that fed you. Yet it is the only way, because real kindness does not enslave. Real love does not bind with obligation. And real generosity expects nothing in return. The debt was never real, only the cage was. But by the time the victim realizes it, years may have passed, and the manipulator, smiling in their massive kindness, has already moved on to their next target, carrying their invisible chains in hand. The invisible debt is not a gift. It is a curse disguised as love. And once you see the bars, you will never look at generosity the same way again. There are many ways to control a human being, but few are as quick and efficient as the guilt switch. It is not a chain, nor a cage, nor even a trap. It is a button buried deep inside the victim's mind. And once the manipulator learns how to press it, the victim obeys without question. The guilt switch works because guilt is one of the heaviest emotions we carry. Unlike fear, which fades when danger passes, or anger, which burns itself out, guilt lingers. It corrodes from within. It makes you punish yourself even when no one else does. A skilled manipulator knows this. They don't need to hurt you. They make you hurt yourself. Imagine this. You disagree with the manipulator. You finally find the courage to resist. And then, with just a few words, they press the switch. "After all I've done for you, if you really love me, you wouldn't do this. You're the reason I suffer." Suddenly, the power shifts. You were ready to fight, but now you feel like the villain. You question your motives, your morality. You wonder, am I selfish? Am I cruel? Am I ungrateful? In that instant, your rebellion dies, strangled by guilt. The switch can be installed early, often in childhood. A parent who controls with shame teaches a child that love is conditional. Approval must be earned. Any act of independence risks rejection. The child grows into an adult who still hears the echo of that voice. You should be ashamed. The manipulator doesn't even need to be present anymore. The victim becomes their own warden. But the guilt switch can also be installed later. A partner convinces you that their happiness depends entirely on you. A friend reminds you of your past mistakes at just the right moment. A boss hints that your lack of sacrifice is harming the whole team. With enough repetition, guilt becomes automatic, like a reflex. The switch doesn't need to be pressed consciously anymore. It flicks on by itself. The beauty and horror of this technique lies in its simplicity. Unlike the invisible debt, which is vague and endless, the guilt switch is precise. It's a single trigger, custom-made for the victim. For some, it's the fear of being selfish. For others, the terror of being ungrateful. For others still, the shame of past sins never forgiven. The manipulator identifies this weak spot and sharpens it like a blade. Then, whenever control is threatened, They press it. The victim folds. Resistance collapses. Guilt floods the system. And here is the worst part. Guilt feels righteous. Unlike fear, which we recognize as external, guilt feels internal, moral. When the switch is pressed, the victim doesn't think, they are manipulating me. They think, I am wrong. I am bad. The manipulator vanishes into background, and the victim punishes themselves. This is what makes the guilt switch so devastating. It doesn't just control actions, it rewires conscience. The victim becomes complicit in their own control, believing they deserve the pain. The prison becomes self-sustaining. Many religions, cultures, and families exploit this principle. Guilt is framed as virtue. If you don't feel guilty, you don't care enough. But guilt can be manufactured. False guilt is indistinguishable from real guilt in the mind. The manipulator doesn't care which one you feel, as long as it controls you. Some victims live their entire lives under the switch. They marry who they are told, work where they are told, sacrifice dreams that were never even allowed to breathe. And whenever they feel the faint spark of rebellion, the switch is pressed. The spark dies. The system holds. But the guilt switch has one weakness: awareness. Once the victim recognizes a pattern, once they see that the guilt is artificial, imposed, weaponized, the power begins to fade. Because guilt only works when you believe it reflects truth. When you see it as a tool, it loses its weight. The switch becomes harder to press. Of course, manipulators know this. That is why they weave guilt with love. They convince you that rejecting guilt means rejecting the relationship itself. If you stop feeling guilty, it means you don't care. This fusion of love and guilt makes the switch nearly unbreakable. Because who wants to stop loving? And so, the cycle continues. A single word, a single glance, a sigh of disappointment, and the victim collapses. Not because they are weak, but because the switch was wired into the deepest part of their soul. The guilt switch is one of the simplest tricks of dark psychology, but in its simplicity lies its terror. A manipulator doesn't need chains, cages, or threats. They need only one button. And once they find yours, they will press it again and again until you no longer remember what it felt like to act freely. There's a prison unlike any other, built not of bars or walls, but of reflections. It is called the mirror cage. The manipulator does not lock you inside it. You lock yourself. They simply hand you the mirror and whisper, "Look." The mirror cage begins with flattery. Not the crude kind, but something sharper, more precise. The manipulator studies you, discovers what you crave to hear, and reflects it back at you. They don't say, "You're amazing." They say, "You're amazing because you're selfless." Or, "You're strong because you never complain." Or, "You're special because you always put others first." Do you see the trick? The manipulator doesn't just praise you, they define you. And once you accept the reflection, you begin to live inside it. You don't want to lose it because it feels good. It feels like identity. Soon, you start to police yourself. If the mirror says you are selfless, then selfishness becomes your greatest fear. If the mirror says you are strong, then weakness feels like death. You build your behavior around protecting the reflection, terrified that if you stop, the mirror will crack. And so, the cage forms. The manipulator doesn't need to force you anymore. You enforce the prison yourself, because you don't want to lose the image of who you are supposed to be. The mirror cage works because humans crave identity. We want to know who we are. We want others to confirm it. A manipulator offers this confirmation, but at a cost. They define you so narrowly, so rigidly, that you are trapped inside their definition. You are not free to be complex, contradictory, flawed. You are only allowed to be what the mirror shows. It feels flattering at first. You feel seen. But over time, the reflection becomes suffocating. If you try to step outside it, you feel shame, fear, even panic. What if I'm no longer loved? What if I lose the only proof of who I am? The manipulator presses further. They reward you when you align with the reflection, and they punish you when you deviate. If you're selfless, they shower you with affection when you sacrifice, and withdraw it when you assert yourself. If you're strong, they admire you when you endure and belittle you when you show pain. The reflection becomes a leash, and you tighten it yourself. The most dangerous aspect of the mirror cage is that it doesn't feel like control. It feels like identity. The victim doesn't say, "They're manipulating me." They say, "This is who I am." They defend the prison, not realizing they're defending their own chains. Sometimes, the manipulator adds another layer, the threat of shattering the mirror. They remind you, "Without me, no one would see you this way." You begin to believe it. You cling to them desperately, terrified that if they leave, your identity will vanish. You are not just trapped by their definition. You are trapped by your dependence on their gaze. This trick can last for years, even decades. Whole lives can be lived inside the mirror cage. A child becomes a good one and never dares to rebel. A partner becomes a strong one and never dares to show weakness. An employee becomes a loyal one and never dares to leave. The reflection becomes destiny. But here is the paradox. The mirror cage is fragile. One crack in the glass can shatter it. If the victim dares to test a reflection, to act selfishly, to admit weakness, to disobey, they may discover that the world does not collapse. The manipulator may rage, but the victim survives, and in that survival lies freedom. The mirror cage is terrifying because it is built with love and praise. It is not an insult that traps you.
Silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the quiet that soothes or heals. This is a weaponized silence, sharpened, deliberate, suffocating. The manipulator wields it like a blade, and those who fall under its shadow often describe it as more painful than words, more cutting than screams. The silence treatment is one of the oldest tools in psychological warfare. It works because humans are wired for connection. When communication breaks, our brains panic. Silence, when used intentionally, feels like death to the relationship. It makes you question your worth, your reality, even your existence. At first, the silence seems small. Maybe the manipulator doesn't respond to a message. Maybe they give short, cold answers. Maybe they leave the room without explanation. You tell yourself it's nothing. They're tired, busy, distracted, but soon the silence grows heavier. Calls go unanswered. Eyes avoid yours. Presence turns into absence. You are no longer acknowledged, no longer seen. And this is where the trick begins. The manipulator doesn't explain why they're silent. They don't need to. Your brain does the work for them. You begin to search for reasons. What did I do wrong? Did I say something? Did I fail them? You replay every moment, every word, every detail, desperate to find the mistake. This desperation is the hook. The manipulator knows that silence creates anxiety, and anxiety demands resolution. You will bend, apologize, or offer concessions just to break the silence. You will confess to crimes you never committed, just to hear their voice again. The silence doesn't just punish you, it rewrites your behavior. But the cruelty of the silence treatment is not just in the absence of sound, it is in the contrast. The manipulator often uses it after a period of warmth, affection, or closeness. One day they are attentive, loving, expressive, and the next, a wall of silence. This creates a violent emotional whiplash. Your nervous system cannot stabilize. You are addicted to their attention, so when it disappears, you feel withdrawal. And like any addict, you chase the drug. Some manipulators add another layer, selective silence. They speak to others, laugh with others, but not with you. This isolates you, makes you feel targeted, inferior. You watch them pour words into the world while starving you of them. The silence becomes louder than any noise. The silence treatment also shifts the power dynamic. In silence, the manipulator becomes the judge, and you become the defendant. You are left guessing, waiting for their verdict. They hold the key to ending the silence, and you wait, powerless, for them to decide when to speak. The longer it lasts, the smaller you feel. Victims of this trick often describe it as torture. Some say, "I would rather they screamed at me," because anger at least acknowledges existence. Silence erases it. To be ignored is to be annihilated. And in that annihilation, you learn submission. But here lies the paradox. Silence is only powerful if you fear it. If you can endure the silence without bending, the weapon dulls. If you can sit in it, name it, and refuse to chase it, the manipulator loses their grip. Silence can hurt, but it cannot control unless you let it dictate your behavior. Escaping the silence treatment requires one brutal realization. Their silence is not your responsibility. You are not obligated to solve it. You are not required to beg for resolution. Their silence is their choice, not your punishment. Once you see this, the silence transforms. It becomes nothing more than absence, and absence with time loses its sting. Yet for many, this realization comes too late. They spend years inside the cycle. Warmth, silence, reconciliation, repeat. Each silence teaches them to shrink a little more, to fear abandonment a little deeper, until they no longer even need the silence to obey. They silence themselves preemptively, living in fear of triggering it again. The silence treatment is not communication. It is domination. It is the erasure of dialogue, the denial of connection, the starvation of the soul. It is not quiet. It is violence. And here is the final truth. Silence can be a prison, or it can be freedom. When wielded by a manipulator, it chains you. But when chosen by you, silence can liberate. The difference is simple. Who holds the power of silence, them or you?
Gaslighting, a word that has become popular, almost overused. But behind the buzz lies one of the most destructive, insidious, and invisible forms of manipulation. While other tactics use fear, anger, or silence, gaslighting attacks something deeper. It doesn't just try to control you, it tries to erase your reality. Picture this. You're in a room lit by a lamp. Each night, the light grows dimmer, so slightly you almost don't notice. One day you say, "The light seems weaker, doesn't it?" And the answer comes, "No, not at all. You're imagining things." That's how it begins. Little by little, your perception is denied. You start to wonder, am I wrong? Did I miss C? Did I miss here? And step by step, your certainty cracks. That is the essence of gaslighting. Gaslighting makes you question your senses, your memory, your judgment. You see something, but you're told you didn't. You hear something, but they swear they never said it. You feel hurt, but they tell you you're too sensitive, too dramatic, maybe even crazy. It's not an open war, but 1,000 small cuts. Each denial, each contradiction, each mocking laugh chips away at your confidence. Until one day, you no longer know what's real. You don't trust your memory, your emotions, even your own sanity. What makes gaslighting so dangerous is that it often comes from those closest to you. A partner, a parent, a friend, a boss. People you trust. People whose voices weigh heavier than your own. And because you trust them, their version of reality starts to feel more valid than yours. Here's a simple example. You remind your partner of a promise. You said we'd go out this weekend. "No, I never said that. You made it up." At first, you argue back. But when they insist with such conviction, a seed of doubt grows in you. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I really did imagine it. And from that moment, the ground beneath you begins to crack. Gaslighting isn't always verbal. Sometimes it's actions. Hiding your things and denying it. Changing small details around you to make you question your memory. Even altering facts of the past to make you think you've lost your grip. The goal isn't just to deceive you. It's to make you distrust yourself. Over time, the victim stops trusting their memory. Then, they stop trusting their emotions. Finally, they stop trusting themselves. That is the ultimate victory of the gaslighter. When your inner compass is broken, you're left entirely dependent on theirs. Gaslighting erases identity. Many victims say they don't recognize themselves anymore. They feel like they're living in fog, in constant confusion. They don't know what's true, what's exaggerated, what's a lie. And in that fog, the manipulator's voice becomes the only guiding star, even if it's leading straight into the abyss. But here's the secret. No matter how much gaslighting tries to erase it, there's always a small, stubborn voice inside. A whisper saying, "This isn't right. This isn't normal. This isn't who I am." That whisper may be faint, but it's the beginning of resistance. So how do you break the cycle of gaslighting? First, by reclaiming your reality. Write things down. Keep records of conversations. Collect proof of what actually happened. When your mind is under attack, evidence becomes your ally. Second, seek outside validation. A friend, a therapist, a neutral observer who can say, "No, you're not crazy. You're right. This really happened." Gaslighting thrives in isolation. Outside voices restore balance. And most importantly, naming it breaks its power. The moment you recognize gaslighting for what it is, the fog begins to lift because doubt cannot survive in the light. Gaslighting is an invisible war. A war against your mind, your senses, your reality. But the truth has a weight of its own. You can silence it, bury it, twist it, but you can't destroy it. And the moment you trust that truth again, the gaslighter's game collapses. Yes, gaslighting is a prison made of illusions and doubts. But every prison has a key, and that key is your self-trust once rediscovered. There's a weapon that is subtle, yet devastating. A weapon that doesn't just aim at your mind, but at your reputation, your identity, your very place in the world. It's called the smear campaign. Unlike gaslighting, which destroys you from the inside, the smear campaign destroys you from the outside. It poisons the way others see you, making sure that when you finally cry out for help, no one believes you. By the time you speak, your credibility is already gone. Imagine this. You begin to notice manipulation, lies, cruelty. You think, "I must expose this. I must speak." But while you prepare to gather your courage, the manipulator is already several steps ahead. They whisper to your friends, your family, your colleagues. You know she's unstable. He's always overreacting. Don't trust what they say. They tend to exaggerate. By the time you raise your voice, the stage is already set. You're no longer the truth teller. You're the villain, the crazy one, the liar. That's the genius of the smear campaign. It silences you before you even speak. Smear campaigns often begin with subtle seeds. A little comment here, a laugh there, a harmless story that casts you in a strange light. At first, you don't notice, but slowly, your social world tilts against you. People look at you differently, question you, pull away. You feel the ground shift beneath your feet without knowing why. And then, when you realize what's happening, it's too late. The rumors have spread. Your reputation is tainted, like ink spilled in clear water. The lie cannot be fully contained. Why do manipulators use smear campaigns? Because isolation is their greatest ally. If they can separate you from allies, they can control you completely. If they can make others doubt you, they don't need to silence you. You'll be silenced by disbelief. There are many forms of smear tactics. The crazy narrative, painting you as unstable, dramatic, paranoid. The abuser role reversal, accusing you of the very harm they are doing. The victim mask, presenting themselves as the poor soul who suffers because of you. The unreliable label, exaggerating your flaws, twisting your mistakes into proof that you cannot be trusted. The cruelty is that smear campaigns often work because they mix a little truth with the lies. A real argument, a real weakness, a real mistake, stretched, twisted, reframed until it becomes unrecognizable. And because it has a grain of truth, others believe it more easily. The psychological effect of a smear campaign is brutal. You feel powerless. How do you defend yourself against whispers you can't hear? Against conversations you're not invited to? Against looks that change without explanation? It's like fighting a shadow. You swing your fists, but the enemy is invisible everywhere and always one step ahead. Over time, you begin to doubt yourself again. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too sensitive, too angry, too broken. That's the double victory of the smear campaign. It destroys your reputation outwardly and your confidence inwardly. But here's the paradox. Smear campaigns reveal more about the manipulator than about you. People who spend their energy poisoning others eventually show their true colors. The mask slips, the contradictions pile up, the truth buried for a while, eventually pushes through the cracks. So, how do you resist a smear campaign? First, by refusing to play the manipulator's game, defending yourself frantically, arguing with every rumor, desperately try to clear your name. That only feeds a narrative. It makes you look exactly how they want you to look. Unstable, defensive, guilty. Instead, the best weapon is calmness. Silence where possible. Dignity, always. Let your actions speak louder than their words. Over time, consistency outshines lies. Second, protect your circle. Not everyone will believe the manipulator. Some will see through it. Focus on those few, even if they are only one or two people. A single ally who believes you is more powerful than a dozen poisoned minds. Third, remember, you are not alone. Smear campaigns are common tools of narcissists, abusers, toxic leaders. The fact that it's happening to you is not proof of your weakness, but proof of their fear. They attack because they know your voice is power. At its heart, the smear campaign is about control, about silencing the truth before it can be spoken, about rewriting the narrative before you even enter the stage. But here's the hidden truth manipulators forget. The truth has patience. It waits. And when it finally surfaces, it shatters lies in an instant. Yes, a smear campaign can stain your reputation, isolate you, break your trust. But it cannot erase who you are. Lies may spread fast, but truth endures. And in the end, endurance is stronger than speed. So if you're the target of a smear campaign, remember this. You are not who they say you are. You are not the rumors, the whispers, the caricature they paint. You are more. And though the world may not see it now, one day it will. Because shadows can only exist where there is light. There is a weapon colder than words. A weapon made not of insults, not of shouts, but of absence. It is called the silent treatment. At first glance, it doesn't look like much. Someone ignores you. Someone refuses to speak. Someone withdraws. You might even think, what's the harm? They're just quiet. But silence can be louder than screams. And when used as a weapon, it can cut deeper than any insult. The silent treatment is not simple silence. It is not someone needing space. It is not healthy distance. It is deliberate, calculated, designed to punish you, confuse you, and bend you to their will. Picture this. You send a message, no reply. You call, no answer. You enter the room, and they walk away. You ask what's wrong, but they stare past you as if you don't exist. The more you try, the colder they become. The more desperate you get, the more power they feel. That is the essence of the silent treatment. It tells you, you are invisible. You don't matter. You don't even deserve acknowledgement. Psychologically, it is devastating. Human beings are wired for connection. To be ignored is to feel erased. It awakens deep fears, rejection, abandonment, worthlessness. That's why the silent treatment works so well. It doesn't just make you sad. It makes you panic. It makes you question your value, your reality, your place in someone's life. And here lies the trap. When someone gives you the silent treatment, your instinct is to chase. You want to fix it. You apologize, even if you did nothing wrong. You beg for answers. You lower yourself, hoping to regain their attention. But that's exactly what the manipulator wants. They want you on your knees, desperate for their voice. Their silence becomes your leash. There are several phases of the silent treatment. The punishment, you cross the line, so they withdraw affection, conversation, or presence until you submit. The power play, they use silence to prove control, showing that they can disappear anytime, leaving you unsettled. The disappearing act, they vanish without explanation, making you wonder what you did wrong, while keeping you hooked in confusion. The cold wall, even when physically present, they refuse to engage. Blank stares, no responses, a suffocating absence in the room. The cruelty is that it leaves you with no defense. If they shouted, you could shout back. If they accused, you could respond. But with silence, there's nothing to grab onto. You're left fighting a ghost. And so, the pain festers inside you, unanswered. Over time, repeated silent treatments reshape your behavior. You become hypervigilant, careful not to trigger their withdrawal. You censor yourself, walk on eggshells, shape your life around avoiding the cold void of their silence. That's how the manipulator wins, without saying a single word. But make no mistake, the silent treatment is abuse. It is emotional starvation. It is psychological exile. It is a way of telling you, I control whether you exist in my world. So, how do you resist it? First, by naming it. Once you recognize that the silent treatment is a tactic, it loses some of its power. You stop thinking, what did I do wrong? And start realizing, this is how they control me. Second, by refusing to chase. The hardest thing is to break the cycle of begging for their attention. The more you chase, the stronger they become. The more you stand still, the weaker their silence grows. Silence is only powerful if it hurts you. If you stop reacting, the weapon dulls. Third, by remembering your worth. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. Their silence says nothing about your value. It only reveals their inability to communicate with maturity. There is also a paradox hidden in the silent treatment. The manipulator believes that silence makes them powerful, but in truth, it exposes their weakness. Only someone who cannot face conflict, who cannot handle vulnerability, who cannot speak truth, hides behind silence. The strong communicate, the weak disappear. If you are caught in the cycle of silent treatments, understand this. It is not love. It is not care. It is control. And love that seeks control is not love at all. Silence can be healing when chosen freely, but when imposed as punishment, it is poison. And like all poisons, it works only if you swallow it. So the next time silence comes at you like a wall, remember, you don't have to climb it. You don't have to break it. You can simply walk away. Because the most powerful response to silence is freedom. If silence is one of the coldest weapons, guilt is one of the heaviest. It is not sharp like anger, nor loud like insults. It is weight, invisible, crushing weight. And those who know how to wield it can make you carry burdens that are not yours. A guilt trip is simple at first glance. Someone makes you feel responsible for their emotions, their problems, even their failures. They don't have to shout. They don't even have to accuse directly. A sigh, a disappointed look, a carefully chosen phrase, enough to wrap you in invisible chains. After everything I've done for you, I guess I just don't matter to you. If you love me, you wouldn't act like this. Each sentence is designed to pierce the heart, not the mind. Because guilt doesn't need logic. Guilt is about emotion. You don't stop to question whether their claim is fair. You just feel the sting of responsibility. You feel bad. You feel selfish. You feel like you owe them. That's the trap. The manipulator knows this. Guilt makes people move. Guilt makes people comply. Guilt makes people sacrifice themselves in the name of doing the right thing. And once you start responding to guilt, you get stuck in a cycle. They demand you comply. They reward you with temporary relief, and then the cycle starts again. There are many forms of guilt trips. The martyr, they always remind you of their sacrifices. I gave up everything for you, and this is how you repay me. The victim, they position themselves as eternally wounded, and you as the cause. You hurt me so deeply, I'll never recover. The conditional lover, they make love or approval depend on obedience. If you cared about me, you'd do this. The disappointed parent, not always biological, but psychological. I expected better from you. You've let me down. The cruelty of guilt trips is that they target your humanity. They don't attack your flaws. They attack your goodness. If you are empathetic, caring, or responsible, you are the perfect victim. Because when someone suggests you've caused harm, you want to fix it. But here is the truth hidden beneath every guilt trip. It is not about your mistakes. It is about their control. The manipulator uses guilt because it works, because it makes you question yourself, because it bends your will without visible force, and because, in the end, you punish yourself more than they ever could. Think of it like a poison dart. They inject a tiny amount of guilt and then step back. You do the rest. You torture yourself. You replay conversations. You wonder, am I selfish? Am I ungrateful? Am I cruel? And while you're lost in self-doubt, They get what they wanted, compliance. But here lies the paradox. Guilt trips reveal more about them than about you. Someone who truly cares does not weaponize guilt. They communicate. They ask. They express needs. Only someone who fears losing control turns your empathy into a leash. So how do you break free? Spot the pattern. When someone constantly makes you feel bad to get their way, you are not the problem. The pattern is. Naming it breaks the spell. Check reality. Ask yourself, did I really do something wrong? Or am I just being manipulated into feeling wrong? If your only crime is having needs, boundaries, or independence, the guilt is false. Refuse the load. You are not responsible for someone else's happiness, mood, or choices. Guilt tries to hand you a backpack full of rocks. You can simply say, that's not mine to carry. Respond calmly. The manipulator thrives on your emotional reaction. Instead of defending yourself frantically, answer with clarity. I hear you're upset, but I don't accept responsibility for your feelings. The hardest part is resisting the urge to prove your goodness. When guilt floods in, you want to show you're not selfish, not ungrateful, not cruel. But the more you defend, the deeper you sink. The key is to stand firm in silence, not their silence, but yours, a silence of refusal. The truth is, guilt trips are emotional blackmail. They say, do what I want, or I'll make you feel like a monster. But here is the secret. You don't have to play. You don't have to prove your heart to someone who twists it. Healthy love does not demand through guilt. Healthy care does not shame. Healthy connection does not weigh you down with invisible debts. If you have ever lived under constant guilt trips, you know the exhaustion. You know the heaviness of carrying everyone's happiness on your shoulders. You know the slow erosion of your own needs, your own voice, your own self. But the day you put the backpack down, the day you stop carrying what isn't yours, that is the day you reclaim your freedom. Because guilt is only powerful if you accept it. Once you see it for what it is, a trick, a leash, a shadow, it loses its grip. And suddenly you are lighter. And suddenly you can breathe. And suddenly you realize you were never guilty. There's a reason every manipulator, cult leader, or toxic partner eventually reaches for the same tactic: isolation. Because influence is strongest when it is uncontested. As long as you have other voices in your life, friends, family, mentors, you have perspective. You have mirrors that reflect back your worth, your sanity, your reality. But when those voices are silenced, the manipulator's voice becomes the only one you hear. Isolation doesn't always come in obvious chains. Rarely does someone say, you're not allowed to see your friends. That would reveal too much. Instead, it is subtle, progressive, almost invisible. It begins with suggestions. I don't think they really understand you like I do. Your family is jealous of us. Why waste time with them when you could be with me? At first, it sounds like care, like exclusivity, like passion. But each suggestion is a small cut, severing you from your network of support. The isolation strategy thrives on 3 tactics. 1. Discrediting your circle. The manipulator plants seeds of doubt about the people in your life. They highlight flaws, exaggerate conflicts, twist intentions. A friend becomes toxic. A sibling becomes selfish. A parent becomes controlling. Soon, you begin to look at your own circle with suspicion. 2. Monopolizing your time. Isolation also happens through sheer saturation. Constant texts, calls, demands for attention. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? At first, it feels like devotion. Later, you realize that surveillance disguises love. 3. Creating dependency. The final step is to make you feel like they're your only true source of comfort, understanding, or safety. They present themselves as the only one who gets you. And when conflict arises with others, they magnify it to prove their narrative. See, they never really cared. Only I'm here for you. The brilliance of this tactic is that it works silently. One day you wake up and realize the circle that once surrounded you is gone. You don't call your friends anymore. Your family feels distant. You hesitate to reach out because you fear judgment, or because you've been told over and over they don't care. And in that silence, the manipulator becomes your entire world. Why is isolation so powerful? Because humans are social creatures. We don't just crave connection. We require it for perspective. Alone, our doubts multiply. Alone, our fears echo louder. Alone, we're easier to sway. This is why cults separate members from families. This is why abusive partners discourage outside friendships. This is why toxic workplaces label outsiders as the enemy. Isolation is not just control of your environment. It is control of your narrative. But there is a hidden cost for the manipulator too. Because once you are isolated, you are fragile. They may succeed in becoming your entire world. But now they also bear the responsibility of keeping you dependent. And no one can play savior forever without cracks showing. The way out of isolation begins with one step: reconnection. It might feel terrifying because the manipulator has convinced you that others won't welcome you back. But often, the opposite is true. The people you were distanced from are still waiting, still hoping, still ready to remind you of who you are outside the cage. Rebuilding connection is like opening a window in a dark room. At first, the light feels blinding, but soon you realize how much air you were missing. The key insight: healthy love never cuts you off. It may respect boundaries, it may encourage space, but it never seeks to erase the other voices in your life. True care expands your circle. It doesn't shrink it. So if you ever feel yourself becoming smaller, lonelier, more disconnected, ask yourself, is this love or is this isolation? Because the moment you name the strategy, the walls begin to crack. And once the walls crack, freedom is only a matter of time. Words can wound. Words can heal. But silence is a weapon all its own. When used with intent, silence becomes sharper than accusations, heavier than screams, and colder than rejection. The manipulator knows this. They understand that sometimes the most devastating blow is not what they say, but what they refuse to say. This is what makes the power of silence so insidious. It leaves you drowning in your own thoughts, twisting and spiraling with no anchor. 1. The silent punishment. Imagine you've done something small, something you may not even understand, that displeases them. Instead of telling you, they withdraw. No calls, no texts, no eye contact. Suddenly, the warmth turns into an icy void. You try to ask, did I do something wrong? They shrug. Or worse, they say nothing at all. This silence is not absence. It is punishment. It's designed to make you restless, guilty, desperate. You replay every moment in your mind, searching for the mistake. You begin apologizing without even knowing what for. And that is the goal. Silence forces you to discipline yourself. 2. The withholding of validation. Humans crave recognition. A smile, a word of encouragement, a sign that we are seen and valued. When a manipulator withholds these, it is not neglect, it is control. Imagine telling them exciting news. I got promoted at work. Instead of celebrating, they say nothing, or they give you a flat look, maybe a dismissive nod. The silence around your joy deflates it. You begin to wonder if your accomplishments mean anything. You start needing their approval more and more, because when they do speak a kind word, it feels like oxygen in a suffocating room. 3. The ambiguous silence. Sometimes silence is a mystery. Did they hear you? Do they agree? Are they angry? The ambiguity gnaws at your brain. Silence becomes a mirror where your worst fears are projected. This ambiguity is not accidental. It is calculated. By refusing to clarify, they allow your imagination to torture you on their behalf. 4. The strategic pause. Silence can also be used mid-conversation. A well-placed pause after your confession, your request, your vulnerability, it creates tension. The manipulator waits, knowing you will fill the silence. You will explain more, justify more, reveal more. And the more you speak, the more power they gain. The danger of silence lies in its invisibility. Outsiders rarely notice it. No one will say, they're hurting you by not speaking. But inside, silence can erode your confidence faster than words ever could. Think of silence as a vacuum. Nature hates vacuums. And so does the human mind. When faced with silence, your brain rushes to fill it. With guilt, with fear, with self-doubt. The manipulator doesn't even have to say the lie. You'll invent it yourself. But here's the paradox. Silence is also a tool of freedom. When you reclaim it, when you wield it consciously, silence becomes strength. The silence of refusal to engage with manipulation. The silence of walking away instead of defending yourself against baseless accusations. The silence of choosing peace over endless argument. So how do you know the difference between toxic silence and healthy silence? Toxic silence makes you shrink. Healthy silence makes you stronger. Toxic silence isolates you in doubt. Healthy silence roots you in clarity. The manipulator uses silence to control you, but you can use silence to escape them. The moment you stop filling their silence with your fear, the game collapses, because silence without your reaction is just emptiness. And emptiness has no power unless you give it meaning. The truth is, silence reveals. It reveals the fragility of their dominance. It reveals your capacity for patience. It reveals who needs words to manipulate, and who no longer needs to play the game. The power of silence cuts both ways. And once you learn to wield it, you'll never fear it again. A gift is supposed to be an expression of love, of generosity, of joy. But in the hands of a manipulator, a gift becomes a chain. It is no longer something given freely. It is something designed to bind you, to remind you, to control you. This is the dark psychology of the gift that binds. 1. The debt of kindness. When someone offers you something, your natural instinct is gratitude. But gratitude has a shadow, obligation. Manipulators know this. They give not out of generosity, but out of strategy. Every gift carries a hidden contract. You owe me. It can be something as small as a coffee, or as large as paying your rent. The scale doesn't matter. The principle does. The moment you accept, they store it in their mental ledger. Later, when they want something from you, they'll say, "After everything I've done for you, you can't even do this one thing?" The gift transforms into a weapon, and gratitude transforms into guilt. 2. The trap of extravagance. Some manipulators overwhelm you with gifts so large, so extravagant, that refusing them feels impossible. Imagine someone buying you an expensive phone or covering a luxury trip. At first, you're dazzled. You think, wow, they're so generous. But soon you feel the weight. How could you ever repay them? How could you ever say no to them after what they've given? That is the point. The gift was never about you. It was about securing your compliance. The price tag isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in freedom. 3. The public gift. Sometimes a gift isn't given in private. It's given in front of others. A birthday surprise, a dramatic gesture, a show of devotion. Everyone claps, everyone praises. And you're trapped. Because how could you refuse it now? How could you admit you don't want it, that it feels heavy, that it feels wrong? The manipulator hides behind the applause. You are cast as ungrateful if you resist. The gift becomes a prison, locked with the key of social pressure. 4. The selective withdrawal. Another tactic is the strategic removal of gifts. They shower you with things, then suddenly stop, or they remind you of what they've given and suggest you no longer deserve it. You wouldn't even have that job if it weren't for me. You know I'm the reason you're not still struggling. The gift becomes conditional retroactively. You start behaving carefully, anxiously, just to ensure they don't revoke their generosity. 5. The illusion of generosity. Not all gifts are tangible. Some are favors, time, connections, advice. The manipulator frames themselves as a savior. They rescue you, they guide you, they open doors for you. But each of these gifts is laced with expectation. They don't help because they want to see you succeed. They help because they want you indebted. The core truth. Real gifts are free. They expect nothing. Manipulative gifts always have strings, always have shadows. The gift that binds works because society teaches us to value generosity, to reciprocate kindness. Manipulators twist this value into a chain. They use our own goodness against us. But here's the escape. The power of a gift ends when you refuse to carry the debt. Gratitude can be genuine, but it doesn't mean you owe them your autonomy. You can say, thank you, and still say, no, because a gift that comes with conditions is not a gift. It is a bribe. It is a leash. It is manipulation wrapped in pretty paper. And once you see the chain, you can choose to break it. The gift that binds is one of the most subtle tricks. It hides behind kindness, behind smiles, behind generosity. But deep down, you can feel the weight. If the gift makes you feel free, it's true. If it makes you feel trapped, it's false. Remember, the best gift anyone can give is freedom. And freedom never comes wrapped in chains. Some prisons have walls, some prisons have bars. But the most dangerous prison of all is the one you cannot see. A prison built not of steel, but beliefs, fears, and invisible rules. This is a manipulator's masterpiece, the invisible cage. 1. The architecture of fear. To build the invisible cage, manipulators don't need locks or chains. They need words. They need repetition. They need to convince you that freedom is impossible. They might say things like, "Without me, you'll never make it. The world out there is cruel. I'm the only one who understands you. You can't survive without my help." At first, these are just statements, but repeated over and over, they carve grooves into your mind. They become beliefs, and beliefs can be stronger than iron. 2. The trap of doubt. The manipulator plants seeds of doubt. Every time you try to act independently, they question you. Are you sure that's a good idea? You really think you're smart enough for that? You always mess things up. Soon, you start asking those questions yourself. You become your own jailer. You censor your own dreams, your own attempts. The cage no longer needs to be maintained by them because you're maintaining it yourself. 3. The illusion of safety. Another part of the cage is comfort. The manipulator convinces you that inside their control, you are safe. Outside, danger waits. They tell stories of betrayal, failure, humiliation. They paint the outside world as a storm and their presence as shelter. The irony? That shelter is the very prison keeping you small. But because it feels warm, familiar, predictable, you stay. For the boundaries you cannot see. The invisible cage is powerful because it isn't physical. If you saw bars, you'd resist. But instead, the boundaries live inside your own perception. A manipulator doesn't need to stop you from leaving. They just need to make you believe you can't. Like an elephant tied with a thin rope since childhood. Eventually, the elephant grows strong enough to break free. But it doesn't. Why? Because it believes the rope is unbreakable. That is the invisible cage. 5. The silent guard. What makes this trap terrifying is its silence. There are no alarms, no shouting, just quiet conditioning. Day after day, until your world becomes smaller and smaller. You stop applying for opportunities. You stop speaking your truth. You stop dreaming too loudly. The manipulator doesn't even have to push anymore. You stay in the cage willingly, mistaking it for your home. 6. The way out. Escaping the invisible cage doesn't require physical strength. It requires awareness. The first step is to see the bars that aren't there. To notice the doubts, the fears, the rules that aren't your own. Ask yourself, who told me I couldn't? Who benefits from me staying small? Whose voice echoes in my mind when I hesitate? The moment you realize those limits are not yours, the bars begin to dissolve. The manipulator loses their hold. Freedom feels terrifying at first. The cage was predictable. Outside, uncertainty reigns. But uncertainty is not a prison, it's possibility. The core truth. The invisible cage is built out of lies and reinforced by fear. It thrives when you don't question, when you don't test its walls. But the truth is simple. The door was never locked. The manipulator's greatest trick is convincing you that you're trapped. Your greatest victory is stepping out anyway. The invisible cage is subtle, suffocating, and deadly. It doesn't just trap your actions, it traps your mind. And yet, the moment you awaken to it, the walls vanish. Because freedom is not something they give you. Freedom is something you claim. If fear builds the walls of the invisible cage, guilt is a sticky web that keeps you stuck inside. Manipulators know this. If they can make you feel responsible, ashamed, or indebted, you will remain tied to them, long after their influence should have ended. 1. The currency of control. Guilt is a currency, and manipulators spend it generously. They remind you of your mistakes, your failures, your flaws. Even the smallest slip becomes a weapon. After everything I've done for you, This is how you repay me? You should be ashamed. If it weren't for me, you'd be nothing. These phrases are not observations. They are chains. Each one weighs heavier than the last, binding you to a sense of endless debt. 2. The trap of obligation. A classic manipulation tactic is to give, not out of kindness, but to establish obligation. They buy you gifts, offer you help, or sacrifice something for you. Then they cash in. I gave you this, so now you owe me. Remember how I was there for you? You can't say no to me now. In reality, kindness expects nothing in return, but their generosity is never free. It's bait, and once you accept it, you're caught. 3. The weapon of the past. Manipulators are historians. They archive your errors, your regrets, your missteps. When they need leverage, they bring out the files. They'll remind you of something you said years ago, a time you failed, or a moment of weakness. This constant replay ensures you never forget. It keeps you living in the past, unable to move forward. You don't notice it, but while you carry guilt for yesterday, they keep control over today. 4. The shame spiral. Shame is guilt's sharper cousin. Where guilt says, I did something bad, shame says, I am bad. Manipulators know how to twist guilt into shame. Instead of targeting your actions, they target your identity. You're selfish. You're ungrateful. You'll never change. When you internalize these attacks, you no longer see yourself as capable of freedom. You see yourself as broken, undeserving, and unworthy. That belief cements the web tighter. 5. The invisible debt. The cruelest part of the guilt web is that it's never ending. No matter how much you give, no matter how hard you try, the debt is never paid off. If you sacrifice one thing, they demand another. If you apologize once, they demand it again. You keep running in circles, trying to make it right, but the finish line doesn't exist. That's the point. The manipulator designs it so you never escape the feeling of owing them. 6. Breaking the web. Escaping guilt's grip requires one radical truth. You do not owe them your life. Yes, you've made mistakes. Everyone has. But mistakes do not make you a slave. Yes, people may have helped you, but true help does not demand eternal repayment. Ask yourself, am I being reminded of this mistake because it serves me or because it serves them? Am I carrying guilt that isn't even mine? Who benefits when I keep apologizing? When you realize that the web was spun to keep you trapped, not to keep you safe, you can stop struggling and simply walk out. 7. The antidote to guilt. The antidote is self-forgiveness. Forgive yourself for your past. Acknowledge it, learn from it, and then release it. When you forgive yourself, guilt loses its grip. The manipulator's words bounce off, no longer able to pierce. Their debts become meaningless. Their history lessons lose power. Freedom from guilt is not about forgetting. It's about reclaiming your right to move forward. The core truth. Manipulators weave webs of guilt to hold you in place. They want you tied to yesterday, ashamed of yourself, and forever indebted to them. But guilt is not proof of truth. It is proof of their control. And the moment you forgive yourself, you tear the web apart. If guilt keeps you tied to the past, comparison locks you out of the present. Manipulators know that one of the fastest ways to weaken someone is to pit them against others, siblings, colleagues, friends, even strangers. It's a subtle, relentless way of saying, you are not enough. 1. The poison of better than. Comparison is rarely neutral. It is a weapon designed to shrink you. Look at how hard they work. Why can't you be more like that? She's prettier, smarter, more successful than you. Other people will be grateful to have what you have. Each phrase is a dagger, and over time, those daggers carved out into your identity. 2. The manufactured rivalry. Manipulators often manufacture rivalries where none exist. Parents may pit siblings against each other. Bosses may praise one worker to humiliate another. Partners may compare you to an ex. Why? Because divided, you are weaker. Distracted by jealousy or insecurity, you no longer question their control. Instead of looking at them, you look at yourself and others, wondering why you don't measure up. 3. The moving goalpost. Even when you succeed, the manipulator shifts the standard. You may achieve something they demanded, only for them to say, well, that's fine, but look at what she did. It's still better. The goalpost is never fixed. The comparison is endless. No matter how much you accomplish, you remain less than. That's the design. For the mirror of inadequacy, the danger of constant comparison is that it turns into a mirror. Eventually, you no longer need the manipulator to compare you. You do it to yourself. You scroll through social media and feel smaller. You hear of someone's success and feel like a failure. You look in the mirror and see not yourself, but a list of shortcomings. The manipulator has planted a self-sustaining cycle. You become your own jailer. 5. The silent violence of envy. Comparison breeds envy, and envy corrodes quietly. It makes you resent others, even those who mean no harm. But envy is not natural here. It is manufactured. It's a direct result of someone whispering in your ear, reminding you that you'll never be as good. Manipulators thrive when you envy others, because envy isolates you. Instead of building alliances, you feel threatened. Instead of seeking community, you feel competition. Alone, you are easy to control. 6. Breaking the chains. Escaping comparison requires a radical truth. You are incomparable. It sounds cliche, but it's the weapon that breaks the chain. Every person has a different journey, a different timeline, a different measure of success. You cannot compare a tree to a river, a mountain to the sky. Each is complete in itself. The manipulator wants you to believe your value is measured against others. The reality, your value is intrinsic, untouchable, and non-transferable. 7. The antidote, self-definition. The antidote to comparison is defining your own measure. What matters to you? What makes you proud? What is your standard of enough? When you stop borrowing someone else's scale, you stop shrinking under its weight. You grow on your own terms. 8. Turning comparison into inspiration. Comparison isn't always poison. It can be fuel if you reframe it. Instead of seeing others as threats, see them as proof of what's possible. Their success doesn't mean your failure. Their growth doesn't mean your stagnation. The manipulator uses comparison to break you. You can reclaim it to motivate you, but only when you are free from their voice. The core truth: manipulators pit you against others, so you never realize your own worth. They keep the chains tight by moving the goalpost, magnifying your flaws and feeding your envy, but you are not measured by anyone else's life. Break the chains. Define your own value. And remember, the only person you should strive to be better than is the version of yourself from yesterday. If guilt ties you to the past and comparison robs your present, forced apologies steal your dignity. One of the most insidious tools of a manipulator is to keep you endlessly saying, "I'm sorry." 1. Apology is control. Apologies are meant to heal. But in the hands of a manipulator, they become chains. They don't want reconciliation. They want domination. Every time you apologize for something you didn't do, you reinforce the lie that you are the problem. They raise their voice. You apologize for making them angry. They break a promise. You apologize for expecting too much. They insult you. You apologize for being too sensitive. The roles are reversed until you forget who actually caused the wound. 2. The false peace treaty. The manipulator trains you to believe that apology is the price of peace. You learn that if you don't say sorry, the conflict drags on, the punishment grows harsher, the silence becomes unbearable. So you apologize not because you believe you were wrong, but because you want the storm to end. But here's the trap: the peace is never real. It lasts only until the next invented offense. You are not apologizing for actions. You are apologizing for existing. 3. The addiction to guilt. Over time, the cycle creates an addiction to guilt. You start scanning every interaction, looking for what you might have done wrong. You walk into rooms already feeling guilty. You preemptively apologize before speaking. It is the perfect system for control. A person who constantly feels guilty will never stand up for themselves. 4. The endless courtroom. Being with a manipulator is like living on trial. Every word, every gesture, every silence is evidence against you, and the judge never rules in your favor. They demand apologies not to fix problems, but to keep you in a permanent posture of submission. Your bowed head, your lowered eyes, your whispered sorry. These are the victories they collect. 5. The identity shift. When you live long enough in forced apology, you begin to believe you are inherently wrong. Not just your actions, but you carry shame like a second skin, even when you're alone. The manipulator no longer has to say anything. You apologize internally for simply being. 6. Breaking the cycle. Escaping this trap requires courage, because it means enduring conflict. Refusing to apologize for something you didn't do will provoke rage. Silence will feel like fire. But here's the truth. The moment you stop apologizing for existing, the manipulator loses one of their sharpest weapons. You don't need to be rude. You don't need to fight. You simply need to hold the line. I don't agree with that. That's not my responsibility. No apology where none is due. 7. The power of real apology. Here's the paradox. Once you are free, apology regains its true power. A genuine apology becomes sacred again, an act of humility, reconciliation, and strength. Because a real apology is not a chain. It is a bridge. The core truth. Manipulators force you into endless apologies, so you live bowed, ashamed, and silenced. But your worth does not need permission, and your dignity does not require their approval. Break the cycle. Hold your ground. And remember, an apology should never be a cage. Manipulators are rarely outright monsters. If they always shouted, always insulted, always attacked, you would leave. Their genius lies in mixing cruelty with kindness, making you doubt your own perception. And one of their most effective weapons is fake empathy. 1. The mask of care. A manipulator knows that outright hostility won't hold you forever. So they wear the mask of empathy. They lean close, nodding as if they understand your pain. They mimic the right expressions, soft eyes, tilted head, gentle voice. They don't feel your suffering. They study it, not to comfort you, but to learn how to use it against you later. 2. The illusion of connection. When you first meet them, fake empathy feels like a warm blanket. They seem to get you like no one else ever has. You confess something vulnerable, and they respond perfectly. I know exactly what you mean. I've been through the same. I'm here for you always. It feels like destiny, like you finally found someone who understands. But over time, you notice something strange. The empathy disappears when it doesn't benefit them. They comfort you only when it keeps you tied closer. 3. Empathy is a hook. Real empathy heals wounds. Fake empathy hooks them deeper. A manipulator uses your vulnerability as currency. Every tear you cry, every secret you share, every fear you confess becomes ammunition. Weeks later, in an argument, they might throw it back at you. You're just overreacting like when you cried about your job. No wonder your family doesn't understand you. You told me yourself they're tired of your drama. The understanding they once showed becomes a weapon sharpened against you. 4. The cycle of comfort and hurt. The danger of fake empathy lies in its cycle. First, they wound you through neglect, criticism, or betrayal. Then, when you break down, they suddenly show tenderness. They stroke your hair, whisper reassurance, and act as if they're your only safe place. And just when you start trusting again, they twist a knife with another act of cruelty. It is an emotional roller coaster. Pain followed by comfort, cruelty followed by softness. The brain learns to cling desperately to those rare moments of kindness, ignoring the storm of abuse. 5. The gaslight effect. Fake empathy creates confusion. When someone hurts you and then comforts you, your brain struggles to hold both truths. You start to think, maybe I exaggerated. If they were really manipulative, why would they comfort me? Maybe it's me who's broken, not them. And that is exactly the goal, to make you mistrust your own perception and depend entirely on theirs. 6. How to spot fake empathy. There are subtle signs that empathy is counterfeit. It disappears when you truly need it, but shows up when it benefits them. They comfort you in private, but dismiss you in public. They use your vulnerabilities later as weapons. Their words sound perfect, but their actions never change. Real empathy costs something. Fake empathy is effortless performance. 7. reclaiming real empathy. When you break free, the hardest part is trusting genuine care again. You might recoil when someone offers compassion, waiting for the trap. But real empathy exists. It is consistent, it is sacrificial, and it is never used against you. You can reclaim it by first offering it to yourself, by refusing to mock your own feelings the way they did. And then, slowly, you will learn to recognize the difference. Kindness that heals and kindness that chains. The core truth. Manipulators use fake empathy to appear safe while sharpening their knives behind a mask. They don't feel your pain, they harvest it. But once you see the illusion, the mask falls apart. If manipulators never apologize, you would eventually leave. But they know something. A small apology can glue the chains tighter than no apology at all. One, the apology that isn't. When they hurt you, when they cross a boundary, when they humiliate you, there comes a moment where silence alone won't work. So they drop the smallest apology possible. Not out of remorse. Out of strategy. It sounds like, sorry you feel that way. I guess I could have done better. Fine, my bad, let's move on. Each phrase seems like an apology, but emptiness hides behind it. They don't admit the damage. They don't take responsibility, and they don't change. 2. Why small apologies work. You're exhausted from a conflict. You want peace. When they offer even a crumb of regret, your brain clings to it. Maybe they do care. Maybe they're trying. I don't want to fight anymore. The manipulator knows this. A tiny apology resets the cycle. It buys them more time. It keeps you hoping. 3. The weapon of guilt. Sometimes their apology even flips the script. They say, I said sorry. What more do you want from me? You can't keep holding this against me. You're the one who won't let things go. Now you feel guilty for expecting real repair. They've transformed from the offender into the victim, and you become the unreasonable one. 4. Apology is control. To a manipulator, apologies are not bridges. They are leashes. Every time you accept their half-hearted regret, you reinforce their power. You train yourself to live on crumbs. They learn that a 2-second sorry can erase days of cruelty. They don't need to change, just perform remorse on command. 5. The difference between real and fake. A real apology has 3 marks. Acknowledgement of harm. I hurt you and I. Taking full responsibility. It was my fault, not yours. Commitment to change. Here's what I'll do differently. Fake apologies have the opposite marks. Minimization. It wasn't that big a deal. Deflection. You misunderstood. Repetition. The behavior never changes. Once you learn this difference, the fake ones stop working. 6. The psychological hook. Why do small apologies keep us trapped? Because they awaken our empathy. We think, at least they tried. We want to believe they are capable of love, capable of growth. That belief becomes a chain. Because each fake apology promises a future that never arrives. 7. Breaking the cycle. Freedom begins with this realization. Apologies without change are manipulation. It doesn't matter how soft the tone, how sad the eyes, how dramatic the sigh. If the behavior repeats, the apology was a lie. The antidote is clarity. When you stop measuring love by their words and start measuring it by their actions, the illusion shatters. The core truth. Manipulators don't apologize to heal. They apologize to reset your hope, to keep you chained. A small apology is not proof of care. It is proof of control. Not all manipulation comes with aggression. Sometimes it comes wrapped in weakness, in tears, in the appearance of helplessness. This is the art of playing the victim. 1. The mask of suffering. Manipulators know that people are naturally compassionate. We want to help. We want to comfort. So they put on a mask of suffering. They tell you how cruel the world has been to them, how everyone has betrayed them, how they are always misunderstood. In their story, they are never the aggressor, always the wounded soul. 2. How it hooks you. When you hear their story, you feel sympathy. Your heart softens. You want to protect them, defend them, be the one who finally gives them the love they never had. This is a trap, because once you see them as fragile, you stop holding them accountable. You excuse their lies. You justify their cruelty. You carry their burdens. thinking you are saving them. 3. The subtle power of guilt. If you ever resist, if you ever set boundaries, they sigh deeply. They might say, I knew you'd hurt me too. Everyone always abandons me. I thought you were different. Immediately, guilt floods your chest. Instead of anger at their behavior, you feel shame for causing more pain. This guilt is the leash they tighten around your neck. 4. The endless cycle. No matter how much you help, it's never enough. You give money. You give time. You sacrifice your own peace. Yet somehow, the tragedy continues. Why? Because their suffering isn't meant to be solved. It's meant to control. They don't want healing. They want dependency. The more you invest in saving them, the harder it becomes to walk away. 5. The inversion of roles. Notice the inversion. You start as the rescuer, but slowly, you become the villain in their script. They cry, you comfort. They fail, you fix. But one day, when you can't give more, they accuse you of cruelty, betrayal, or abandonment. And you feel like you're the one who failed. The manipulator has successfully made you the villain, while they remain the eternal victim. 6. Why this works so well. Humans are wired for empathy. Seeing tears, hearing a trembling voice, triggers our instinct to nurture. That instinct is powerful, and manipulators know it. By presenting weakness, they gain power. It's paradoxical, but effective. The weaker they appear, the stronger their grip on you becomes. 7. Breaking the illusion. The way to escape the victim game is to separate true suffering from weaponized suffering. Ask yourself, do they take responsibility for their actions or always blame others? Do they seek real solutions or stay stuck in the same cycle? Do you feel empowered by helping or drained and guilty? Real victims heal when supported. Fake victims drain endlessly because their wounds are performance, not reality. The core truth: a manipulator's tears are not always real. Their pain may be genuine, but it is also their tool. And once you see the performance, once you recognize the endless script of victimhood, you stop playing your role as their savior. You realize you were never rescuing them. You were only feeding their power. Chapter 44, The Silent Punishment. Sometimes the loudest manipulation isn't yelling, it's silence. Manipulators know that silence can cut sharper than words, because silence denies your very existence. 1. The withdrawal of presence. Imagine this. Yesterday they were affectionate, talkative, maybe even loving. Today, nothing. They stop replying to your messages. They look past you in the room. They answer in one-word sentences. If they answer at all, this isn't normal quiet. It's strategic silence. It's punishment without explanation. 2. The effect on you. You feel a deep unease. Your brain scrambles. What did I do wrong? You replay conversations, gestures, tiny details, searching for the mistake. Silence creates guilt in the victim, even when you've done nothing. The manipulator knows you can't stand attention. They know you will crawl toward them for relief. 3. Why silence is powerful. Words can be debated. Shouts can be resisted. But silence is a void. You can't argue with nothing. The human brain is wired to crave connection. When that connection is abruptly withdrawn, it feels like oxygen being cut off. So you beg. You apologize. You lower your boundaries just to make the silence stop. 4. The reappearance. After hours, days, or even weeks, the manipulator breaks the silence. Suddenly they're warm again, maybe even affectionate. They act like nothing happened. And you feel relief so strong it overrides the pain they caused. This cycle, punishment by silence, reward by attention, conditions you like a lab experiment. You become addicted to their approval. 5. The hidden message. The silent treatment carries an unspoken threat. If you displease me, I will erase you. It's not about communication. It's about dominance. Every time you break first, every time you chase them, they tighten the leash. They train you to fear abandonment so deeply that you obey without question. 6. How to recognize it. Normal cooling off periods in healthy relationships are different. In healthy silence, the person says, I need space right now. I'll talk to you later. The silence has a purpose, calming down. After, they return and communicate. in manipulative silence. No explanation, no time frame, only tension, fear, and guilt. 7. Breaking the power of silence. The only way to defeat silent punishment is not to chase it. When you refuse to beg, when you stop apologizing for things you didn't do, the silence loses its bite. You see it for what it is, a tantrum in disguise. But this requires strength, because silence taps into primal fears of rejection. The manipulator is gambling on your loneliness. Your power comes from recognizing the gamble and refusing to play. The core truth, silence, in the hands of a manipulator, is not peace. It is a weapon, an invisible whip. When you see it clearly, you no longer dance for scraps of attention. You stand still, and in stillness, the whip breaks. Sometimes, the most powerful manipulation is not done with words, but with their absence. This is the art of silence. 1. The void that speaks. Imagine you send a message, pour out your feelings, confess your fears, and receive nothing. No reply, no reaction, just silence. At first, you think it's nothing. They must be busy. But hours turn into days, and their silence grows heavier than any insult. This is not forgetfulness. This is strategy. 2. How silence becomes control. Humans hate uncertainty. When someone we care about withdraws, we begin to obsess. Did I do something wrong? Are they angry? Are they leaving me? The manipulator knows this. By withholding words, affection, or attention, they create a void, and you rush to fill it. 3. The hook of anxiety. You start over-explaining, apologizing for things you didn't do, offering gifts, time, and sacrifices just to break the silence. And when, finally, they respond, even with the smallest word, it feels like oxygen after drowning. That relief is addictive. The silence, followed by crumbs of attention, becomes a cycle that conditions your brain like a dog waiting for a treat. 4. Punishment without violence. This is why silence is so effective. It punishes without shouting. It dominates without lifting a hand. It makes you the one who begs, while they remain calm, aloof, untouchable. You feel small. They feel powerful. And the balance of the relationship shifts. 5. The false sense of peace. Sometimes, silence is even worse than anger. When someone yells, at least you know what they feel. But silence is a ghost. It makes you doubt everything. Not just their love, but your own worth. And that's the secret. Silence doesn't only control your behavior. It reshapes your identity. You begin to see yourself as guilty, flawed, unworthy of attention. 6. The reversal of roles. Notice what happens. They hurt you by ignoring you, but you feel guilty, as if you were the one at fault. You apologize. You chase. You explain. They never need to defend themselves, because silence has already won the argument. 7. Why it works so well. Humans crave connection. The silent treatment threatens that primal need. Our brain interprets rejection as danger, even death, because deep down, we are wired to fear isolation. The manipulator exploits this ancient fear to tighten their hold. 8. Breaking the silence game. The only way out is to stop rewarding silence. Ask yourself, do I want to chase someone who withholds love to control me? Why am I begging for scraps of attention when I deserve respect? When you refuse to chase, silence loses its power, because silence is only effective when you fear it. Once you embrace it, once you see it for what it is, a weapon, not a truth, the chain breaks. The core truth. Words can wound, but silence can enslave. The manipulator's greatest trick is not in what they say, but in what they refuse to say. If you do not see the trap, you will spend your life begging for responses that were always meant to keep you weak. But once you understand, silence no longer dominates. You do. They say mirrors never lie. But when you are trapped with a manipulator, even the mirror begins to betray you. The beginning of the trap, it always starts the same way. You make a mistake, small, almost invisible. You raise your voice. You forget something. You are late once. They catch it, and suddenly, you are no longer the victim of their coldness, but the criminal of their invented reality. You always do this. You never care. It's your fault things are like this. The words hit you with such certainty that you don't even think to defend yourself. Why? Because the manipulator doesn't just point at your mistake. They amplify it until it swallows the truth. The silent swap. Here lies the trick. They turn themselves into the victim and you into the aggressor. If they shout, it's because you provoke them. If they disappear, it's because you suffocate them. If they betray you, it's because you push them away. Every knife they stab into the relationship is placed into your hand in the story they tell. And you believe it, living inside their story. The danger is not that they blame you once. It's that they make you carry that blame like a second skin. Day after day, you begin to doubt yourself. You replay every conversation in your mind. Maybe I did sound harsh. Maybe I should have been more patient. Maybe it is me. But that is the poison. The blame becomes a mirror, and when you look at yourself, you no longer see your true reflection. You see the distorted version they created. Why it works. The manipulator thrives on your empathy. Because only people who care, only people with a conscience, can be crushed by guilt. A cruel truth. The more you love, the easier it is for them to bend you. And so, the weapon of blame is not random. It is targeted at your kindness, your sensitivity, your desire to make things right. The escape. What is the cure? It begins with a question. Whose voice is this? When the mirror of blame shows you a monster, ask yourself, is this really me, or is this a story they forced into my head? Guilt is only powerful when it is true. Once you realize that their blame is a cage, you begin to see the cracks. And through those cracks, your real reflection starts to return. Final whisper. The manipulator's greatest masterpiece is not the chains they put around your body, but the prison they build inside your mind. Blame is that prison. But once you recognize the illusion, the bars vanish, and the mirror becomes clear again. Maybe if I stay quiet, things will get better. That is how it begins. Not with a fight, not with screaming, but with silence. The manipulator doesn't always need words. Sometimes their greatest weapon is absence, the punishment of silence. You ask the question, they don't answer. You share thought, their eyes turn to stone. You confess your pain. They walk away. At first, you think it's a coincidence. Maybe they are tired. Maybe they need space. But deep inside, you feel it. This silence isn't natural. It's a choice. It's a punishment. The invisible cage. Silence becomes louder than words. Every second without a reply feels like a chain tightening around your chest. You start to panic, to wonder what you did wrong. And that's exactly what they want. The manipulator's silence is not emptiness. It's a performance. It forces you to run in circles inside your own mind. You apologize for crimes you never committed. You beg for forgiveness you don't owe. You lower your voice, your needs, yourself, all for the reward of hearing them speak again. The craving for noise. When the silence finally breaks. With a sigh, a glance, a single word. You feel relief, like drowning lungs gasping for air. But do you see the trick? They have conditioned you to crave their attention. Even when that attention comes poison, you no longer live for love. You live for noise. For any sound that reminds you you're not completely invisible. The mirror moment. Ask yourself this. Why should silence hurt so much? Because silence in the hands of a manipulator is no longer neutral. It becomes rejection, abandonment, a knife that cuts without leaving marks. But here's the truth they never want you to realize. Their silence does not define your worth. Their silence is their weakness, their inability to love, their refusal to face reality. And once you see it, the silence loses its power. Closing whisper. The weight of silence is heavy, but only if you agree to carry it. The day you stop begging for words. The day you refuse to bow before their void. That is the day the silence collapses into nothing. Because silence is only a weapon. When you choose to hear it as thunder. What if I'm the problem? This thought does not arrive like a storm. It slips in quietly, like a whisper you cannot trace. It takes root in your mind, and before long, it grows into an entire forest of self-doubt. Doubt is a manipulator's favorite poison. It is invisible. It does not leave bruises. It does not scream. but it eats you alive one question at a time. The seed of doubt. It often begins with something small. You recall an argument where you were certain you were right. Yet, they tilt their head, smile faintly, and ask, "Are you sure?" Just two words. Two simple words that unravel your entire certainty. Suddenly, your memory feels unreliable. Maybe you did forget. Maybe you did misinterpret. Maybe you are the one twisting the truth. And there it is. The manipulator doesn't need to prove you wrong. They only need to make you doubt yourself. The architecture of gaslighting. Gaslighting is not about replacing your reality with theirs. It's about making your reality so unstable that you run to theirs for safety. They will say, "That never happened. You're imagining things. You always overreact." Each sentence is like a brick, and before long, they build a new house, a house where only their version of events matters. And you live inside it, afraid to step outside, afraid to trust your own eyes. The spiral of self-blame. Doubt is cruel because it doesn't stay in one corner. It spreads. You start doubting your memory, then your emotions, then your instincts, and finally yourself. You look in the mirror and wonder, am I broken? Am I too sensitive? Am I unlovable? You blame yourself for the fights, for the silence, for their coldness, for their cruelty. You tell yourself, if I were stronger, kinder, quieter, smarter, they would treat me better. But this is the ultimate trap, because the more you doubt yourself, the more power you hand to them. The story of the puppet. Imagine a puppet on invisible strings. Each string is a doubt, one tied to memory, one tied to emotion, one tied to identity. The manipulator pulls these strings gently, never with force, and the puppet dances, not realizing the strings exist. This is what doubt does. It makes you move, not by command, but by your own uncertainty. You believe you are acting freely, but you are only reacting to the shadows they planted in your mind, the cracks in the shadow. But here's something the manipulator fears. Doubt, once recognized, loses its grip. Think of the last time you felt absolutely certain of something. A childhood memory, the sound of your own laugh, the warmth of sunlight on your skin. These truths are unshakable. They exist outside manipulation. And when you begin to notice them, the shadow of doubt starts to crack. The manipulator cannot erase your truth. They can only distract you from it, breaking the cycle. To escape the shadow of doubt, you do not need to argue louder or prove yourself endlessly. You need to pause, to breathe, to ask, who benefits from my doubt? And the answer will always be the same. Not you, never you. When you begin to trust your voice again, when you choose to believe your feelings without apology, you cut one string, then another, and another, until the puppet is no longer a puppet, but a person standing freely, in the light of their own truth, the mirror revelation. Here is the cruel irony. The manipulator projects their own flaws onto you. When they say, "You're too sensitive," it's because they're terrified of facing their own fragility. When they say, "You're imagining things," it's because they are hiding what they know is real. When they say, "You're crazy," it's because they are desperate to protect their own madness. Every word meant to weaken you is a confession disguised as an attack. And once you see this, once you recognize that their shadow is not yours to carry, you step out of the darkness. Closing whisper. The shadow of doubt is heavy, but it is not eternal. A lie, repeated 1,000 times, is still a lie. A truth, whispered once in quiet of your heart, remains stronger than all their voices combined. Do not let their shadow define you, because you are not the echo of their doubt. You are the voice of your own truth. There is a silence that speaks louder than words, a silence that fills the gaps between gestures, between glances, between breaths. And in that silence, a hidden language unfolds, the language of shadows. Shadows are not simply the absence of light. They are presence concealed, a truth half hidden, a trace of something real yet untouchable. Every human being carries shadows within them. Unspoken fears, unconfessed desires, repressed rage, lingering guilt. These shadows rarely reveal themselves openly. Instead, they speak indirectly, through hesitation, through contradiction, through the small cracks in the mask we wear. A manipulator, a predator of the psyche, understands this language well. They know that what is not said is more revealing than what is spoken. They know that silence often screams, that an avoided gaze betrays more than 1,000 smiles, that a trembling hand uncovers more than eloquent speech. To them, shadows are not emptiness. They are maps, maps that lead straight to the weaknesses of the soul, the unspoken truth. Imagine a room filled with people. Everyone smiles, everyone talks, everyone plays their roles. Yet beneath the surface, shadows swirl. One man avoids eye contact when the subject of loyalty comes up. A woman laughs too loudly, desperately covering her unease. A friend touches her arm repeatedly, subconsciously shielding themselves from scrutiny. These are shadows, tiny manifestations of the inner truth that people fight to bury. Psychology has a term for this: leakage. When the unconscious betrays the conscious, when the truth leaks through tone, gesture, or micro-expression. For most people, these leaks pass unnoticed. But for those who understand the language of shadows, every glance, every pause, every sigh becomes a sentence in a secret script. The manipulator listens, not to words, but to what lingers between them, not to the story told, but to the shadow of the story denied. Shadows as weapons. To exploit shadows is to master control. Consider how silence can be more unsettling than aggression. A manipulator may withhold words, not because they lack something to say, but because silence forces the other to fill the void. The victim projects their own fears, insecurities, and guilt into that emptiness, effectively trapping themselves. This is the weaponization of shadows. Instead of striking directly, the manipulator lets the victim's own imagination do the work. A simple unfinished sentence, a prolonged silence, a raised eyebrow, these plant seeds of doubt. And doubt, once planted, grows roots deeper than certainty ever could. The victim begins to wonder, what did they mean by that pause? Why did they stop speaking? Did they notice something? Did they suspect me? In the absence of clarity, the mind becomes its own tormentor, living among shadows. But it is not only manipulators who dwell in this twilight. Every one of us communicates through shadows, consciously or not. We use them to avoid conflict, to conceal pain, to preserve dignity. You may smile at someone you despise, hide tears behind a mask of strength, or pretend calm while chaos rages inside. These shadows protect us, but they also isolate us. For if no one sees our true selves, do we even exist to them? If all that others perceive are shadows, what happens to the light within? There lies a tragedy. To live too long in shadows is to forget the shape of your own being. The manipulator thrives in this tragedy. The more you deny your own truth, the easier you are to control. Reading the darkness. To survive in a world of masks, you must learn to see what others miss. You must train your perception not on the obvious, but on the peripheral. Watch how people breathe when questioned. Notice the microsecond delay before they answer. Observe how their pupils widen when certain topics arise. Listen not to their certainty, but to the stutter hiding behind it. These are shadows, and they tell stories more honest than words. But caution, this ability is double-edged. To see shadows everywhere is to risk paranoia. To read too deeply is to project your own fears onto others. You may begin to doubt even the innocent, suspecting shadows where there are none. And perhaps that is the cruelest truth of all. Once you start listening to shadows, silence is never silent again. The prison of silent power. There is another layer to the language of shadows. Dominance. In negotiations, the one who speaks less often controls more. In conflicts, the one who maintains silence unsettles the aggressor. In relationships, the one who withholds affection forces the other into desperate submission. This is a paradox. Silence appears passive, but in truth, it exerts invisible power. Shadows do not fight openly. They suffocate quietly. And those trapped within their grip may not even realize they are being strangled until it is too late. Shadows within ourselves. Yet perhaps the most dangerous shadows are not those around us, but those inside us. the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or bury. Jung called this the shadow self, the hidden reservoir of everything we reject in ourselves. Our envy, our hatred, our forbidden desires. To ignore these shadows is to give them power. They leak into our words, our gestures, our relationships. They sabotage us from within. A man who denies his rage may erupt in sudden cruelty. A woman who represses her envy may poison friendships with subtle bitterness. Shadows do not vanish because we hide them. They grow stronger in the dark. The manipulator knows this too. They will force you to confront your own shadows, not to heal them, but to use them against you. They will trigger guilt, awaken insecurity, inflame jealousy. And once you are at war with yourself, you cannot resist anyone else. Conclusion: becoming fluent in shadows. To master the language of shadows is to walk a narrow path. On one side lies power, the ability to see truth where others see illusion, to resist manipulation, to uncover what hides beneath masks. On the other side lies danger, the temptation to manipulate others or to drown in your own paranoia. The truth is simple, though unsettling. Shadows are everywhere. They are in silence, in hesitation, in the flicker of an eye. To ignore them is to remain blind. To see them is to risk obsession. But to understand them, that is where real strength lies. For once you learn the language of shadows, you will never again be deceived by the surface of things. You will see the tremor behind the smile, the fear behind the confidence, the cruelty behind the kindness. And though this knowledge may isolate you, it will also set you free. Because only in the shadows can you find the truth. There are places in the mind where reality and illusion blur together, where the truth is reflected not as it is, but as it is feared. These places are not made of stone walls or twisting corridors, but of glass, shimmering, reflective, and treacherous. The mirror is a symbol of self-perception, of identity, and of truth. But what happens when the mirror no longer shows what is real? What happens when it reflects shadows instead of substance? This is the realm of the mirror of shadows, one of the darkest metaphors in the psychology of manipulation and self-deception. Unlike the labyrinth, where confusion traps you, the mirror traps you by showing you exactly what you most fear, or what someone else wants you to believe. Imagine standing in front of a tall, blackened mirror in a dimly lit room. The glass ripples faintly, as though alive. You lean closer, expecting to see yourself. But what stares back is not your true reflection. It is a distorted version of you, a version filled with flaws, weakness, and despair. The longer you stare, the more convincing it becomes. This is how the mirror of shadows works. It replaces truth with fear and fear with belief. Psychologically, this is the power of projection. Manipulators use it relentlessly. They reflect your own insecurities back at you, exaggerating them until you believe that they define you. A partner says, "You're not strong enough without me." A boss whispers, "You'll fail if you try to leave." A so-called friend remarks, "Everyone thinks less of you." Each phrase is a mirror, dark, distorted, and relentless. And once you accept that image as reality, you begin to live according to it. The mirror does not always need another person to activate it. Sometimes, the darkest manipulator is the voice within. When your own thoughts whisper that you are unworthy, when your own reflection feels like an enemy, the mirror has already done its job. Depression, anxiety, and self-doubt are often fueled by this distorted reflection. You believe you see the truth, when in fact you are only seeing your fears magnified. The chilling thing about the mirror of shadows is that it feels convincing. Unlike a nightmare that fades upon waking, the reflection remains. You look into the glass and you recognize yourself, but altered. You see the slumped shoulders, the tired eyes, the subtle imperfections. And though you know the mirror is lying, part of you begins to believe it anyway. This is why mirrors are such powerful tools in psychological horror. They blur the boundary between truth and imagination. Manipulators exploit this in subtle, terrifying ways. They don't just tell you what they want you to believe. They show you. They set up scenarios where you fail, then say, "See? You're exactly what I told you." They exaggerate small flaws until they feel like defining features. And slowly, without realizing it, you start to see yourself only through their eyes. the mirror becomes permanent, and the shadows it shows begin to consume your self-image. But there's a deeper, even more sinister aspect of the mirror shadows. It does not only reflect your weaknesses, it can also reflect your desires. Sometimes, it shows you the version of yourself you want to be, but twisted, corrupted. It tempts you with illusions of power, control, or perfection. And then, like a trap, it binds you to that false image. You chase the shadow, believing it to be your destiny, while the truth slips further away. In ancient myths, mirrors were said to hold souls, to capture fragments of life itself. Psychologically, this is not far from the truth. The mirror can capture your identity, locking it into a distorted shape. And once your self-image is broken, everything else collapses. Confidence disappears. Trust fades. Choices seem impossible. You are left standing before a piece of glass, staring at a shadow of yourself, unable to remember what the real you looked like. The question, then, is whether there is an escape. Can one break the mirror's shadows? The answer is not simple. Smashing the glass does not work, for the mirror exists in the mind, not the physical world. You cannot break it with violence or denial. The only way to overcome it is with clarity, to stand before the glass and say, "This is not me, this is only a shadow." The more you remind yourself of this truth, the weaker the mirror becomes. But this takes immense strength, because every time you look into the mirror, it whispers. It tells you that you are wrong, that you are weak, that you will never escape. And the more you resist, the louder the whispers grow. To break free, you must stop fighting the reflection. You must recognize it for what it is, a lie. Shadows cannot exist without light. And if you bring even a small light into the room, the shadow begins to dissolve. The mirror of shadows is terrifying because it reveals a simple truth about the human mind. Perception creates reality. If you believe you're trapped, you are. If you believe you are powerless, you become powerless. But if you believe that the reflection is false, if you trust the possibility of truth, the mirror loses its hold. Now imagine the mirror one last time. You stand before it, and the reflection stares back, twisted and cruel. Its mouth moves, whispering your fears. But then you raise a lantern, the same faint light you carried through the labyrinth. The glow strikes the glass, and for the first time, you see something behind the shadow. A clearer image, faint but real. And as the light grows, the shadow begins to fade. You are still there, still real, still whole. The mirror cracks, not because you smashed it, but because you no longer believe the lie it tells. This is the truth of the mirror shadows. It is powerful only if you give it power. It manipulates, deceives, and destroys, but it is nothing without your belief. And once you stop believing, the mirror is nothing more than glass. Chapter 50 ends with this chilling realization. The most dangerous prison is not made of stone or iron, but of your own reflection. There is a type of psychological manipulation so insidious, so carefully designed that it does not strike like a sudden blow. It does not scream, does not shock, does not terrify outright. Instead, it is quiet, patient, subtle, like water dripping steadily onto stone. It wears down resistance bit by bit until the mind begins to crumble without realizing it is under attack. This is the slow erosion of sanity, the weapon of manipulators who understand that chaos and madness are not always imposed by force, but by a gentle, deliberate unraveling. The principle of subtle manipulation. When people think of manipulation, they often imagine bold lies, dramatic betrayals, or overt threats. But the most dangerous form of control is the one that leaves no obvious fingerprints. The manipulator does not need to scream or strike. Instead, they rely on confusion, small contradictions, and endless repetition of half-truths. A person subjected to this kind of psychological erosion begins to doubt themselves. They wonder if they misheard, misremembered, or misunderstood. Each small doubt is a crack in their mental armor. Over time, the cracks connect, forming a web of uncertainty that destabilizes the entire mind. The manipulator smiles. They do not need to destroy their victim all at once. They only need to keep the victim questioning, hesitating, and weakening, until finally, the victim clings to the manipulator as the only source of certainty. Gaslighting, the slow poison. The classic example of this erosion is gaslighting, a tactic where the manipulator denies reality itself. A light switch that was clearly turned off is declared never touched. A cruel insult is reframed as just a joke. Events that happen are said to never have occurred, and events that never happen are insisted upon with conviction. The victim, at first, resists. They know what they saw, what they heard, what they felt, but the manipulator persists with calm authority, repeating the denial until the victim begins to question their own memory. Over days, weeks, or months, the victim stops trusting their own mind. And when you cannot trust your own perception of reality, you become vulnerable. You look outward for answers. And who stands ready to provide those answers? The manipulator. It is not the speed of the attack that makes gaslighting so effective. It is the slow, steady erosion of certainty, the power of inconsistency. Human beings crave patterns. We feel secure when the world is predictable, when the rules remain constant. Manipulators understand this, and so they deliberately inject inconsistency into interactions. One day they are kind, affectionate, and generous. The next day they are cold, cruel, or distant. The unpredictability keeps the victim in a state of anxious vigilance, constantly wondering what version of the manipulator they will face. Over time, the victim begins to adapt by overanalyzing their own behavior. Did I say something wrong? Did I smile enough? Did I upset them without realizing it? The victim starts to believe that stability will only return if they can decode the manipulator's mysterious rules. This constant uncertainty is another form of erosion. It chips away at self-confidence and replaces it with dependency. Isolation, cutting the anchor. A mind under siege still has defenses as long as it can rely on outside voices. Friends, family, mentors. Manipulators know this, which is why they often isolate their targets. Isolation can be physical, but it is often psychological. The manipulator plants seeds of distrust. Your friends don't understand you like I do. Your family is against you. They're jealous of you. That's why they say those things. By weakening the victim's trust in others, the manipulator ensures that their voice becomes the loudest, most trusted, and eventually the only voice. Once isolation is complete, erosion accelerates. The victim has no anchor, no external mirror to remind them of who they once were. They drift deeper into the manipulator's constructed reality, the emotional pendulum. Another subtle tactic is the emotional pendulum, alternating between extreme kindness and extreme cruelty. This creates a cycle of hope and despair. One moment, the manipulator offers love, validation, or reward. The next, they withdraw affection, lash out, or punish. The victim is caught between extremes, swinging back and forth until their emotional stability collapses. The cruelty breaks the victim down. The kindness gives them a reason to stay. The cycle ensures that the victim continues to seek approval, desperate to return to the good side of the pendulum. What they do not realize is that the pendulum is controlled entirely by the manipulator, who decides when and how it swings. This back and forth motion is exhausting. Over time, exhaustion becomes erosion. Why slow erosion works? The brilliance of slow erosion lies in its invisibility. If someone tries to break your mind in a single day, you notice, you resist, you fight back. But when the attack is spread across weeks, months, or years, the victim rarely notices a gradual decline. It is like boiling a frog. Drop it into hot water, and it jumps out. Place it in lukewarm water and raise the temperature slowly, and it will not notice until it is too late. Victims of psychological erosion often look back years later and ask, how did I get here? When did I lose myself? The answer is terrifying. It did not happen all at once. It happened in whispers, glances, contradictions, and doubts. Defense against erosion. Understanding the tactic is a first step in resisting it. Track reality. Keep a written record of conversations, actions, and events. Writing creates an external anchor that cannot be gaslit away. Identify inconsistency. Notice when kindness and cruelty alternate without reason. Recognize the pendulum for what it is. Control. Stay connected. Refuse isolation. Maintain friendships, family ties, and outside perspectives. They act as mirrors when your perception falters. Guard certainty. Trust your intuition. If something feels wrong repeatedly, it probably is. The manipulator thrives in secrecy, confusion, and silence. Exposure and clarity are their enemies. The cost of erosion. The slow erosion of sanity is not just a manipulation tactic. It is a theft. It steals confidence, identity, and stability. It robs people of the ability to trust their own minds. But the most dangerous consequence is this. Once erosion has hollowed out a person, they no longer resist. They surrender not because they are forced, but because they cannot fight anymore. Their will has been replaced by dependency, and that is the ultimate victory for the manipulator. Closing reflection. The slow erosion of sanity is a reminder of the terrifying power of patience. Darkness does not always need to strike with force. Sometimes the most effective weapon is time. If you find yourself doubting your memory, your emotions, your perception, pause. Ask yourself, who benefits from my confusion? Who gains power when I question myself? The answer to those questions may reveal the presence of an enemy who has been eroding your sanity one small crack at a time.